garbage money.
Are we all ready?
Well, sure.
Okay. We have to go live first, is somebody?
I will tell Laura. I think she's watching, but I'll double check.
All right. All right. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. Moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Ansorgi,
Here.
Commissioner Rushton,
Present.
Chairman Bonnet,
Here.
Commissioner Wessel,
Here.
Commissioner Sudis-Little,
Here.
Commissioner Rettenbach,
Here.
Commissioner Lautner. Present. All present.
Thank you. That brings us to communications, proclamations, presentations. We have the administrator's update.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's nice to have some people in the building here and also on Zoom. And you were also on YouTube. We are broadcasting live on YouTube also. And we have some people in the audience here, so I would welcome them. First time we've had a meeting since March 17th. So it's nice to be here. We did open up the building to the public last Wednesday. I believe we were the second county to do that in northern Michigan. Kalkaska opened the previous Friday. I participated in a discussion yesterday, and this week about a third of the counties in the state are opening or have opened. The rest will open in the next week or so. So everyone's planning to be open. I believe Grand Traverse County next week. So everyone is making plans to open up. We have taken many precautions. Let me just walk through some of them. As you come in, you obviously see the plexiglass between the commissioners. And as you walk in the building, we are open now, but we are requiring people to wear masks. We have masks available in every office for people. Fortunately, the way the building was built is easy to have one-way traffic, so all the hallways are one-way traffic flow. We allow one person in each department per time. We have limited the number of people in the restrooms for 2. We have turned off the drinking fountains. We do have gloves available for people that handle documents. And I believe it was a smooth opening. We have people coming in here. We're not overwhelmed, but I think everyone is respectful of the procedures. And I'm just grateful for the staff, all the work they've done the last 2 months. It was a quick change for us to go into this new mode on March 17th, but we did the best we could. I think good thing is I have not had anybody complain that they were not able to get service when they were here. So we're going to continue with the hallway lobby for people that feel comfortable. We still have the drop box there. We still have the phone out there. We still have the copy machine. So people that don't feel comfortable coming in can still operate that way. For people that wish to schedule and make appointments, we're also doing that. So we're trying to be as flexible as we can under these circumstances. I just want to thank everyone, the staff, the employees, the board for their flexibility the last 2 months. For the month of June, we will continue to broadcast our meeting on Zoom, and commissioners do have the option. The governor's order currently expires June 30th for the Open Meetings Act. So between now and then, including next Tuesday, commissioners will still have the option of coming here or remotely. As you can tell from the audience, we have removed many chairs. So our new capacity here is, I believe, 13 people can participate and be in the room. If there's more than 13 people here, we have set up the room downstairs and we're broadcasting live there. I hate to have someone come here and realize they can't be in the room with 17, 18, 19 people. So we do have that option downstairs. As I said, we are still broadcasting on YouTube and people can still call in for their public comments. So I think under the circumstances, we're doing the best we can to get through this. And I'm sure there'll be further updates and modifications in the next month or two.
Thank you. Any questions for the administrator? And then we move on to the probate family court update.
Oh, there is a chair there.
Judge, yes. The judge is here for
I
us.
didn't see it. There were a couple of us here.
Oh, great. Thank you.
All right. I'll breathe a little bit here. Obviously, I'm Marion Kromkowski. I've been a judge now for a year and a half, probate and family court. And in addition to being the judge, I'm also chair of the election commission with John Gallagher and Michelle Crocker. And we've already proofed the ballot for August 4th. We had a number of meetings, with upcoming elections. I'm also the chair of the Courthouse Security Review Committee. Following up on what Chet said, the court, although we're obviously in the building, we are governed by the state court administrator and Michigan Supreme Court orders with regard to reopening practices and policies. So currently, the probate district and circuit court are not open to foot traffic on the second floor. We're still handling all the files. People can file by mail, email, fax, put in the drop box here. We're answering the phones. People can call from the lobby here if they want one of us to come down, one of the staff to come down. So we're in phase 1 of our reopening. We're probably going to be going into phase 2 very shortly, which will then include foot traffic coming up to our little hole in the window there. So since last time I was here, last June, Chris Mattis is our new probate register, and she replaced Susan Richards, who retired in December. Chris is seated behind me. She is the former deputy probate registrar from Grand Traverse County. She and her husband, Eric, are building a home in Sutton's Bay and almost ready. I think they're moving in, or they'll be living in the county very shortly. And Eric works as a corrections officer in Grand Traverse County. Chris has had many, many years of experience. And I don't want to embarrass her, but you hear that phrase, a diamond in the rough. Well, I consider her to be a polished gem. And, and I've reported to you, we knew there was a backlog of cases to be handled in probate court. And that's why I came last time this year, asked for a full-time deputy register, and then we secured a part-time deputy register. What I did not know, and what we have learned since January, is that many of the files that have been neglected go back to 2013. So we're still in a hole, and we're with COVID. We hope to be further along, but we're not as far along as we had hoped. Numerous corrected orders needed to have been entered. A wealth of cases that should have been closed are now closed or transferred to another county where the ward resides. This is in addition to Chris monitoring the new cases and all our active cases. I truly believe with Chris's experience and under her guidance, appropriate corrective measures have been implemented, but once again, we are not out of the hole yet. Rachel Lacrosse is our deputy probate register, and she was hired at the end of February, and I just saw her walk in. Her husband, Kelly, is our deputy director for emergency services, so Kelly and Rachel Lacrosse. Rachel is about finishing her online class to be a certified court reporter. She will then not only be able to record hearings in court, but also to do transcriptions, type them up in a transcript upon request. I thank you for giving us a part-time deputy register or giving the funds to go in that direction. She has been an immense help with diving into the backlog of administrative issues that were discovered at the end of last year or early this year. However, with the COVID restrictions, it's been a challenge to train Rachel in all the areas that we'd anticipated. The training really needs Chris to be almost over her shoulder and showing her things on the computer, and that has been a real challenge. Her responsibilities at this time are preparing files to be transferred to other counties and closing files that are no longer active. She is working 2.5 days a week. When she is finally trained and proficient in the other areas that we hope that she's going to be working on, And when she's a certified court reporter, she'll also be spending more time in court. So yes, we'll have more time for her to be trained on other things, but she'll be pulled away for court. So we will, unless something changes between now and in a very short period of time, we still will be asking for an increase in our budget to pick her up to 4 days a week. So we've also been operating by Zoom. I don't think I've had an in-court hearing also since early or mid-March. So we've been operating by Zoom, and actually we've become more nimble because, you know, when we have to set a hearing with attorneys, we have to, you know, make sure they're open, their schedule's open. Sometimes our hearing could only be a half hour or an hour-long hearing, but with the travel, attorneys need to clear, 2.5 hours. With Zoom, you know, they can be in their home office, their office, and we've been able to schedule things really promptly. And no hearing that needed to be held has not been held. So we've been handling Zoom, and for a while there I was doing Zoom from my home office with a county laptop, and now more or less I'm doing them from the courtroom. But all is well with the Zoom world. We also completed a 5-minute video for a senior expo, so I hope on June 16th it's something they have an amazing program. So when you click on and watch, please look at our link. Chris and I worked very hard on that. We're proud of it. Could be tweaked a little bit, but we're happy with it. And we had also planned to have a training for new and old, well, a new training, first training for new guardians and conservators, and a refresher course for more experienced or older guardians and conservators, but that's been adjourned because we wanted to have it in the courtroom or in here. So that's been put on hold, adjourned to a later date. And we also, I also had plans to have additional training for our guardian ad litems and for the attorneys who handle child abuse and neglect cases to increase their education and their prowess in the courtroom. And that has also been put on hold, but to be done. Maybe it'll all be done by Zoom, but we'll just wait and see, and hopefully we can all be in the same room at some point in the near future. Just a quick note on the Courthouse Security Review Committee. That committee has been tasked with reviewing our current policies and procedures, identifying problem areas, and recommending and implementing improvements. Our first meeting was held in October, and we've met monthly all the way through the end of February. And then COVID hit and everything was kind of put on hold. We got derailed. But we do have a almost finished report, and we'll most likely be providing you with that report and potentially some recommendations, hopefully within the next month or so. So, Chris, do you have anything you would like to add?
I'm happy to be here, but I think the judge has covered everything. Thank you.
All right, so Joe Povolo is going to talk about our family division. Thank you.
Did you have any questions for?
Oh yeah, I guess I should have asked that too. Any questions for me?
Commissioner Answer. What's caseload? Is caseload remaining constant, going up, going down? Either one of you, I don't know.
Yeah, we just pulled those numbers yesterday, and you weren't here last year, but looking at the two, you want to comment on that?
It seems like it's pretty constant. However, we are closing many cases.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but I just wondered,
Incoming
COVID and-
well, I was wondering, in the the probate world, I think we're kind of on par with at least last year.
Mm-hmm.
It seems more in the family division, personal protection orders. I think I handled more last year than I've handled now. And on the domestic relations docket, my sense is there are fewer filings. And I guess Michelle's nodding her head yes. I mean, there's it kind of goes up and down. It always has gone up and down, but I'm not seeing as many of those hearings or filings. So that's kind of down. It'll probably peak up pretty soon. Or maybe people have reconciled while they've all been living together rather than going to be filing for a divorce. That would be my hope. Any other questions or comments?
I just had one about, in the executive orders, I mean, Pat, does the governor have the power to shut down the courts? No. The court is obligated under the Constitution to do the best we can and to, yes, no, justice needs to be served, but there's the authority for limitations. And a lot of that authority comes from the Michigan Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court is authorized to govern the courts.
and the governor probably, as some parallel authority, but it's Michigan Supreme Court. But we have never been totally shut down, and we would not be totally shut down. We would find alternatives because justice needs to be delivered and hearings.
There's the separation of powers.
Mhm.
There's the justice,
Right.
the legislative, and executive.
Right.
So that's what I was wondering, because I mean, in some ways, by limiting the number of people that can be in it, she could sort of step.
Well, and that's why we have resorted to Zoom, and usually, in the past, people would come to the window and file things. We've put in place and notified all the attorneys and the public as best we can that you can file by email, even by fax, which wasn't that common in the past, or send things in by mail. And we're doing Zoom hearings. We're even doing Zoom hearings for individuals who aren't represented by attorneys. More and more people are starting to understand Zoom and the technology. So we have never been totally shut down. What we still aren't, in every, circuit, Antrim, Grand Traverse, Leelanau, that's the little group that we're in, and we're still in what we call phase 1. In order to go to phase 2, there needs to be no increase in cases, or no significant increase in cases in the area, and no cases in the building. So I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to pass into phase 2. Phase 1 in all of the courts, though we have not had any in-court hearings. And that probably will continue in phase 2, do Zoom, but we'll be, inching our way towards, some return to normal, but probably still with Zoom.
Who's setting that policy? Is it the
Michigan
governor?
Supreme Court, no, Bridget McCormick and who's the Chief Justice. So we get administrative orders from the Supreme Court, and the State Court Administrator's Office has been facilitating discussion of all those orders, so that, I think they look at what the governor's doing, but we're our own separate branch. That's why we have a different policy right now. We're happy to be in the building, but we have our own set of policies.
Okay, good.
Any other
I
questions?
wasn't sure
Yeah.
which way.
No,
Okay.
he or she, whoever the governor would be, the Supreme Court rules us.
Yes.
We need you to speak into your microphone. I'm having a hard time hearing you on the YouTube.
Oh, really?
So you might want to pull that up just a little bit and get it closer and speak.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you.
I just got the note.
Thank you.
Judge, how many phases are there? in your-
4.
Four phases.
4. And they already have proposed, the State Court Administrator's Office has done an amazing job. They have proposed model orders that our circuit can modify, but they've already published a Model 3 order, which I have not reviewed. Joe Povolo and the other court administrators have, I think they just met, probably just yesterday, I think they were on a Zoom call, talking about the phase 2. So there's phase 4. But you can, probably we don't go backwards, but if for some reason there was an increase in cases, then in order to go to the next phase, you have to pass certain gating requirements, or if things go awry, then you'd go back to the prior phase. So it's almost like a board game, but it's very well organized, I think. Anything else?
I don't see any other questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Joe, please.
Good morning. Just to dovetail on your question regarding the caseloads too, in the juvenile world, under abuse and neglect, we have less than a half a dozen cases, which is about average. Normally it's between about 3 and 8. And in the juvenile with the delinquents, it's roughly about 110 is what we had within last year, within 2019. And that's with both diversion and prevention and with the kids on probation. So nothing has changed much in terms of our staff. Josephine is back and working and healthy and doing well. John Boonstra, our diversion prevention worker, is still with us, and the newest diversion prevention worker is Sarah Hubble, and she started about 6 months ago, and she's the replaced Cassidy Fisher working with girls. We also have Ryan and Douglas and Therese Larson, our probation officers. And I just am nearing my 32nd year with the county, and I think Jerry Coleman is the longest serving county employee, and then Michelle, and I'm third. So Trudy, I think, is a little bit, few months behind me. So anyway, it's been an honor to be serving the county.
Title for you guys? Are you the old guard?
Old dogs, I don't know.
So I have a quick question for you on, you said Sarah replaced Cassidy?
Yes.
Is that temporary or is Cassidy coming back?
No, Cassidy is she's not on a maternity leave. She is took a position with Glen Lake High School.
Okay.
Yep. So in other news, we continue to be part of the School Justice Partnership, which is a statewide initiative to decrease the number of students truanting from school. The challenges we're facing with that seem to be that there's more online education available, which is part of, some of that's good and some of it just brings the challenges to make sure kids are attending and completing work. The Raise the Age, which was an initiative from several years ago, was passed within this last year, and it will not begin until October of 2021. The good news financially about that is that the state will pay 100% of all newly petitioned 17-year-olds for the first 3 years of implementation. Once data is collected about the numbers and the cost, then they will be reviewing that and determine if the funding on that level will continue or if it'll fall back into what we normally do with child care fund, which is 50-50, but at least 100% for the first few years. We will likely see approximately a 15% increase in our caseload as a result of that increase as well, or the number of 17-year-olds. Our guys group and Voices and Choices are gearing up for an adapted version of summer activities due to COVID. We're not going to be having as large of groups. We'll be having smaller groups. We don't plan to transport the kids. It's just the things you have to do to try to remain social distance and keep the kids safe and keep the employees safe as well. But we did receive the 10%, or not 10%, a 2% grant to buy new kayaks, and our ability to even buy the kayaks was inhibited by COVID-19, but we just were able to make the purchase recently, and they'll be a month and a half before we ever get them, but they're on their way. Volunteer activities remain with things like CASA or RDSS, tutoring, mentoring, and that too is also all limited due to COVID-19 for obvious reasons of limiting face-to-face contact. So dovetailing with the judge with life during COVID-19, it's been an interesting, challenging time for everyone. The guidelines that we have gotten from the State Court Administrator's Office and also Michigan Department of Health and Human Services put some immediate changes into effect, such as removing the face-to-face contact that the probation officers and prevention diversion staff normally have. Contact had continued to be made, however, throughout this time with Zoom, FaceTime, texting, phone calls, and other virtual means. As weather has improved, the staff has been making more yard or driveway or porch visits, keeping social distancing from the kids. They've been challenged with a number of things, such as just making sure kids are fed, kept safe, motivated to do online education, preventing deviousness that stems from boredom, reducing family conflict. We've had some domestic violence situations, assessing and treating mental health, some suicide ideation issues, and substance abuse during this time. We've had youth who have been endangering themselves and others significantly during this time and have had some major roadblocks to getting them help, as detention facilities and placements have had restrictions that require testing and quarantine, thus delaying any type of ability to get them into a placement like we normally would be. On the other hand, we've had some families that have actually drawn closer together due to this time. Absent fathers who were laid off and began doing more activities with their kids. Young ladies who lost their daily social contact at school actually increased their social support through technology. So people find a way to make the best of it and move on. The judge already covered other things I had here about Zoom hearings and about the phase-in process. So I'm going to save everything regarding the child care fund until I talk in a few more minutes. Do you have any questions? Thank you.
Go ahead.
I had this one for you, Joe, and I saved it because I thought this was in your area. But if we have a GPS monitoring system came through claims and accounts, so I'm guessing, is that for a juvenile that is perhaps fleeing or runaway risk?
Yes. Yeah, the GPS or EMS, is that what you're looking at?
It says GPS monitoring.
Okay, well, we have electronic monitoring services. EMS is our contract, program that we use.
Oh, it's through, the company purchased from its EMS, so yes. Okay, so so if you have that's my concern. So if you know there's a possible runaway risk, you can GPS them and.
Correct. It's an alternative to have them placed in detention. When anyone's placed in detention, it's also a cost of about $150 a day or more, whereas the electronic monitoring system costs about $475 a day or something.
And then do you operate that or watch that?
Yes, you can look on a computer screen and literally it'll show a dot where that individual is, and if they get in a car and go somewhere, it's ... So yes, it's very easy to track where they are. And if you can like create a circle, if you want to create a circle around their house and say they can only stay in that area. If they exceed that area, it'll give us alerts. So then we'll know that they've gotten beyond where they're supposed to be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that would bring us to the 13th Circuit Court Community Corrections Update. And I believe we have Shirley Shively here.
Good morning. I hope my internet is okay. It's kind of been iffy the last few days here, and I've been working with my company, so I apologize if I go out. If I do, will you let me know and I will turn off my video?
Sounds
And
good.
then hopefully.
Well, you're doing well.
Okay, good. My name is Shri Shively, and I'm with the 13th Circuit Court Commissions. Many of you have already heard from me many years in a row, but we service Antrim, Grand Traverse, and Leelanau counties for the Circuit Court. We also do service the District Court, but our funding and our, I guess, umbrella of who supervises us comes under the Department of Corrections. And so those are where we're under the Circuit Court, but we do provide services for both the District and Circuit Court.
You have cut off at this time.
So the goal is for us to provide local services here in our communities that people can take advantage of, and the judges can sentence individuals to our programming and local incarceration so that they don't send them to prison. The goal is so that they will stay here, they will remain with their family, they will remain employed, contributing members of our communities, while also addressing the reasons why they're involved in the legal system. And so some of the programs that we provide are, we can refer them to residential treatment for substance abuse programming. That's many places throughout the state as well as in Traverse City, but we can send them throughout the state. There's money available through the Department of Corrections, through the Office of Community Corrections for that. We place people on house arrest with the GPS, as you were asking him. We also do electronic monitoring of individuals. In lieu of being in jail, we can put them on our GPS system. We place them in what are called recovery homes, which are alternative housing that are operated by independent contractors, and they're sober living environments. If they don't have a safe place to live or they've been homeless, or the place where they've been living. The individuals who still live there are still involved in illegal activity. We don't want them going back home. We supervise the community service work program for the district court. And we have a program right on the campus in Grand Traverse County. It's right behind the jail, and it's called it's a probation residential services program that's funded by the Department of Corrections. We call it the PATH, and it's actually leased by Addiction Treatment Services. And it's for, there's up to 12 men that can be placed in that facility. And it's a semi-residential facility. They can leave to go to work, and they can leave to go to counseling, things like that. But otherwise, they're supposed to be in the facility on house arrest. That is a really good program that we refer most male offenders in our area to that facility at one point or another while we're working with them, because they provide very intensive supervision and intensive case management. And it's a really good program for folks who are in our legal system who just can't manage their own lives. They help them to become like on a good, my mind just went blank, routine. And that's one of the problems with those who are involved in addiction, is because they live for today, they live for just the moment. And so this helps them get on a schedule and a routine and get some healthy behaviors and habits forming while they're there. Let's see, there's 6 of us, 6 employees in our department. We have 1 vacancy right now. We had 1 person who actually went to work for the Community Mental Health Agency in the Grand Traverse Jail. He does the counseling program there. So I was really happy actually for him. I wasn't happy for him to leave, but I was happy for him to leave and go work there, because we actually work with that staff member quite often. And so it's a really good placement for us, because then we have somebody that knows what our programming does right there in the Grand Traverse County Jail. So like I said, we have 1 vacancy. I chose not to fill that vacancy because I didn't know what funding was going to be like through this. It kind of happened about 2 weeks before COVID all hit. And so I just chose not to fill it for the time being, to find out what's going to happen with our financials. We do have revenues in our program that pay for several staff wages, and the revenues have gone down, obviously, because pretty much a lot of these programs have shut down. So it just didn't seem to be prudent of me to replace a person while we were waiting to find out what was going on financially for us. We are involved in the drug court program through the district court and the sobriety court program through the district court. So community corrections kind of comes in and fills in a lot of the places that there's holes. So because the state of Michigan provides us with funding opportunities for different counseling programs that aren't provided anywhere else, and the funding's not available anywhere else. And so we kind of fill those holes in each of those programs as far as putting people into counseling and stuff like that. And so a lot of the folks that are in drug court and sobriety court, those are the ones that'll also go into that PATH facility I was talking about in Grand Traverse County. If they're struggling while they're in the drug court or sobriety court program with their sobriety or with stable housing, they'll go into that program too. I have other things, but I think I'll save a few of those for later when I have my presentation of my grant application, so that I can explain some of the budget increases in that. So that's us in a nutshell for this year. Does anybody have questions?
I don't see any, so I guess you did a very good report. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Go ahead.
She's the next item.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's easy.
We have to go through public comment and things too.
Oh.
All right, so she'll stay on, but we have to, so at this time, we have to have the approval of the agenda. We have no related expeditions. Commissioner Ansbergy?
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Support. All those in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, give the same sign. Okay, the motion passes 7-0. So then that brings us to public comment, and I'd like to say that we have a new number for calling in for public comment, and the number is 231-256-8888. 231-8109. That's 231-256-8109. If you have a public comment and you wanted to call in right now, would be the time to do that. We also have a late, towards the end of the agenda, another time when you could call in. And if there's anyone here who wants to have public comment.
Mr. Black wanted.
Did you want to say anything, Mr. Black?
No.
No,
Yes,
okay.
I can do it now or later, either one, but I'm prepared, I guess, to talk now. Mel Black, and I'm from, well, I live at 13846 South Cedar Run Road. Moved up here from Muskegon County, lived there 51 years. And I wanted to make a few comments because I've been following the road commission closely, only because while I was in Muskegon County, I served 12 years on the road commission there. I was chair the last 3 years, and I resigned when I moved up here. I enjoyed doing the work on the road commission. It's an oversight committee, and unfortunately up here, I don't think the current board understands that. Just as I recently joined the planning board, and they give us a pamphlet, Planning Commissioner's Handbook, road commissioners likewise get a handbook. And I'm kind of disappointed in what I've been seeing since I've lived up here. Comments that have been in the paper, how the surrounding counties view Leelanau County's road commission. I golf quite often. When I was on the road commission, I would go to state functions and golf with some of the directors of various townships and counties. And I golfed with Kalakaska, John Rogers, and Bert Thompson from Antrim. And I was commenting, having moved to Leelanau County, and that I indicated I thought I would like to try to get on the board up here, the road commission. And that was prior to going to so many of their meetings. And they commented, well, that county's a train wreck. And I was disappointed to hear that, because it's such a gorgeous township, or county. I shouldn't keep saying township, but having driven all over this county now in the last few months, I've tried to drive a lot, different routes home and to and from places. It is just a beautiful county, and the roads are fairly good shape, but disappointed in what I was hearing at the road commission meetings, the language that comes out of some of the members that is put in the paper. And it's supposed to be a professional group, but unfortunately, I don't see that. And I'm very disappointed in that. Out of 83 counties in our state, 6 of them, the road commission has been taken over by the county commissioners. And I don't advocate that. I don't think it's a good move. In fact, Ingham County has switched back to having a road commission once again. Jackson County is trying some different things, but I really believe in road commissions, and as long as they do their job in the proper manner, and that is an oversight situation, and overseeing and approving budgets, the purchases and so forth, but not micromanaging the road commission. There wasn't one of our 5 members in Muskegon that had any knowledge of how to build a road or how to plow a road. But I go to the county road commission meetings up here, and you've got members trying to tell the director how the people are to plow the roads. Well, that's absurd. You don't take men of different walks of life, women as well. We had a couple ladies on our board. You don't take people of different walks of life and suddenly make them experts on how to plow roads, how to maintain roads. And that's not their job. but they're trying to tell the director how to do his job. You know, one member says, I want to report every month on how many miles the truck drove with that plow not being on the ground. Well, when you got your plows assigned to different areas throughout the county, they leave the garage, they drive to the area that they're assigned to plow. He wants them to plow all the way there. Well, it's that type of thing. You've lost 2 good men in the last 3 years. I really came here with the idea in mind that I would really encourage, out of 83 counties, approximately 50 of them.
You have 5 minutes.
I'll make it quick
You can
now.
conclude, yes.
I'll shorten it right up. Out of 83, 50 of them appoint the road commissioners. The rest either, most of them, the rest of them elect the road commissioners. So I will cut it short. I'm advocating that as a board, you reconsider appointing your road commissioner. What that will do, it'll allow you to have a better control over. My 5 is up?
Yes.
I'll end it there. I'm advocating that you do that.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none and no phone calls, we'll then move on to our agenda. And of course, we have Sharice up again at 13th Circuit Court. Approval of the resolution.
And so before you, you have my application for my 2021 or for our 2021 grant application to the Department of Office of Community Corrections through the Michigan Department of Corrections. This year, it's a total of $325,056. It's an increase of around $36,000 from last year, and I kind of wanted to explain where that increase comes from. They made a change in their eligibility requirements as far as a program called DDJR. It's called Drunk Driver Jail Reduction. The goal of that funding is obviously to target drunk drivers, and it's OWI thirds. What they did this year was open the money because every year it doesn't get spent out. So they opened it up to allow us to apply for more options to use it in. It used to be pretty narrow what we could do. And so I used some of those funds to pay for different areas in my budget. As far as some went into wages, some went into different kinds of programming. As far as paying for those who are on bond, I can pay for their PBT testing, or we have what's called a continuous alcohol monitor that goes on their ankle. And it tests for alcohol every 30 minutes, but it's really expensive. It's roughly $9 and $10 a day. That's our cost for the device, and we don't pass that on. I mean, we have been requiring the person pay for that cost because it's so expensive. So I've applied for money out of the grant for that. That's where the increase comes from, is to help pay for those kinds of things. It'll also help pay for some of the counseling programs that we place offenders in. So those who are OWI thirds, we can pay for the counseling for that for them. So that's where that increase came from. That's why I wanted to kind of explain that. Is I've created a couple new programs. In fact, I asked money for 3 new programming options. They're mostly to do with trauma. So trauma is a big player in addiction. And in those who are involved in the legal system, most people have had some instances of trauma in their life. And so the state wants us to really target those individuals. And so I've applied for programming to create some counseling programs for that. And so that would have been an increase in cost that I could ask the state for. And I don't think that they would have given it to me because, as you guys are aware, the state's probably going to have a shortfall this year. And so I kind of moved money around. And so I moved money from other areas to pay for these new programmings, and then asked for money to replace that from this DDJR fund. So it's kind of a little shell game, and then I asked for some money to increase all of that. So that's why there's an increase. I think I'll probably get it because I can show that I actually made a budget cut in other areas, and then I'm using the money they want us to use anyway. So I'm optimistic that we won't get a budget cut this year, and that we'll get this increase because the increase all comes from this other line item that wasn't being spent out every year. So if they approve this grant, it'll be in September sometime is when I would get the notification. That will be a large chunk of our funding. It'll take us through the 2020 fiscal year. So I just have to come before each of the counties every year to ask for your permission to submit it to the state. The first thing that I have to do is get my Community Corrections Advisory Board to approve it, which Ms. Rushton is on, and they did that on the 26th of May. I do want to let you know, I already submitted the grant application. It's due June 1st. It sounds kind of funny, but every year they require it to be submitted to them before we're ever even able to submit them to the counties. And so I'm not unique. Every single community corrections agency goes before their counties after the grant is submitted. The only thing that's required contractually is for our Community Corrections Advisory Board to approve it before we submit it to the state. So anyway, that is what I'm here for, is to ask you to let me apply for $325,000.
Commissioner
Yes, Ms. Rushton. Oh, sorry, not my turn.
Thank you. I want to applaud Sharice and her team for the work that they do and the programming that they create. In a lot of instances, this is the only hope for those out there in our community that have issues with alcohol, drug. It's our only hope to get clean, it seems. And I think the goal for the department is to give these citizens an opportunity to become productive in our communities. So I applaud you for the work you do. So at this time, I would recommend that the county approves the submission of the 13th Circuit Court Community Corrections Fiscal Year 21 grant application to the Michigan Department of Corrections Office of Community Alternatives as presented and approved by a roll call vote at the board's next regular meeting Tuesday, January 16th. I must have cotton in my mouth today. I apologize.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any questions or statements? Commissioner Answer.
This is going to be a resolution,
Yes.
so I just want to make that clear in the motion that this is actually a resolution that we will be voting on
Right.
next Tuesday.
Yeah, on a roll call. Yeah, and she did state that in her motion.
So will does that recommendation include, it's basically approval of this resolution,
Yes,
correct?
resolution as presented. Commissioner Rushton, does that include the resolution as presented?
I do believe I said that. I said as presented and for the board to approve by a roll call vote at the board's next regular meeting Tuesday, June 16th.
Thank you. Thank you.
We do this every year.
Yes.
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
here we'll just have a regular vote, and then all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. All those opposed, do the same sign. Motion passes 7-0 to move it forward to next. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Then that will bring us to the family court, approval of the annual child care fund plan and budget. Mr. Polo's here.
So as you know, this is the time of year when we have to prepare this for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. This is our cost sharing with them at a 50-50 ratio. My proposal for the budget this year is $696,000 or $290. This is about $1,000 less than last year's budget. This is the funds that we draw on to pay for foster care, institutional care, and in-home supervision. So that's my recommendation, is that the board approve the amount that we're requesting in this coming fiscal year.
Commissioner Answer.
how did we, or, why was the budgeted amount for this year so much less? If,
Just, every year it's a guess.
yes, I know.
And I used some more accurate information, particularly regarding benefits for employees. So that was a little bit of reduction from prior years when I had a higher amount. So just a little bit less there. Most of the programming is all the same. There's some of the same components within the programming as we've had in previous years.
Your contracted amount is more than the budgeted amount. That's why I'm asking.
I'm confused by what you're indicating.
On the EDS, it says your budget amount for this year is $513,343
Where are you getting that number?
from the judge's EDS.
It says this, and this is how much you're asking for.
Oh, that's whatever the county puts in. It's not,
Let me help Joe a little here. We run different fiscal years on this. The state's fiscal year starts in October and runs September till the following. Ours starts in January, goes to December. The contracted year is always going to be higher. We're going to match what we have to do to be compliant with his grant request, because in childcare, it always needs to be higher so that we can get the maximum funding we can. It doesn't, we will put in what we have to be compliant, but if we don't have to put all that money into a fund, we make those transfers as we go with the guarantee that the funding will be there. So that's why you're going to see a little difference. If we need that 696, we will, but right now, we know because of the spreading of the years, it's 513.
Is the actual budgeted amount as shown on the EDS? And that, I guess the question is,
It's because we haven't done 2021's budget, so we have to work with 2020. It's kind of like we did with the MIDC. We're looking at portions of 2020 and 2021, and he has to go out into 2021. We're still back here on 2020. So it will, if you overlap the years, it does always balance out.
I understand why we want to do it this way, but this says we guess really bad.
No, it was based on splitting the year. So if he puts that into 696, that's what the contract is. You haven't technically approved that for the next fiscal year.
and if you, the higher amount you approve, I mean, we don't ever spend anywhere close to that.
I get all that.
Yeah. And
Because, how did we have a budgeted amount that was so much less?
Because the county budgeted amount was approved by the Board of Commissioners back in October of 2019, and he is now projecting into 2021. So there is a.
But also, if I'm showing like 700,000 there, 350 is paid by the state.
And I understand why we want that, to be enough to cover any expected expenses, because we want to get the full reimbursement that we get. I'm just was questioning the budgeted number. Why would we be that far off? But that's up to them. Let's move on.
To make them balance, we would need to go and anticipate what we think you will do in the next budget if you want to see them balanced. Because we're not going to be doing the 21 budget, which this is 9 months of, until later this summer. So, we could put underneath it 2020 county. It's hard when you work with these different fiscal years.
Commissioner Rettenbach.
I move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners the approval of the Child Care Fund Annual Plan and Budget in the amount of $696,000 for Leelanau County fiscal year October 1, 2020 through September 30, 2021.
Support. Commissioner Russell, do you have something you wanted to say?
I was going to make a motion.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, do the same sign. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just did the math and just followed what Michelle said. If you look at the numbers, 696 and 513, 513 is 74% of that. So if you look at the math, 3/4 of the year versus a full year would be 75% or $513. So it does kind of match.
Well, that's not the way this should be done.
Well, well, the state went through that.
Do the budget for the entire year.
When the state made that budget change, it really had an impact.
Right.
They would give
But it
us
doesn't
help.
equate to 75%. But that helps.
All right, so then that brings us to Mr. Booth for the Peter Anderson McGregor workman's compensation update. Dennis, you're up.
Good morning.
Morning.
In my proposal, if you go to page 3, it's all on one page, kind of there to be outlined. If you recall last year, I did a little bit more of a explanation about how a premium, the premium of your policy is developed. And the first thing that is, all carriers in the state of Michigan do is they file a rate. That rate is a per $100 charge. So for every $100 you give a police officer, for instance, a certain amount of that money will basically go to a work comp policy. It's a linear relationship. One of the things that the state, again, the carrier has to file is they can apply credit or debit of 25%. Left or right, depending on your loss history. And why did I bring that up? We'll get to in a second. So it's a very straightforward reality. An employer gives us what they believe to be the estimated payrolls for the upcoming year. Your policy is a 7/1 to 7/1 term annually. You guys typically have that modest, right around 3%-ish increase in payroll. It could be an addition of somebody, it could just be raises. And so just by a linear relationship, if rates don't change at all, you'll see roughly a 3% increase, and it kind of works from there. I want you to look at the 2/3 of the way down. There is this thing called an experience modification factor, that 0.67. And you can see that the 0.67 is truly what your next current mod's going to be for 7/1 of 2020. 0.67, what is this number? This number is a reflection of your utilization of dollars paid to and for injured employee claims. A 0.67 is outstanding. This 0.67, again, this experience mod is a comparison. It compares you against all others that have these same categorical payrolls in their own house, so to speak. And a 1.0 is average. And what is important about being less than a 1.0 is this 0.67 is a factor. It's the final, I'm trying to simplify this, it's the final multiplier in your premium. So by having a 0.67, which means you've had very little utilization, excellent loss history, is that you are paying 33% less than what would otherwise be indicated by the average employer that have these particular codes. Now, 7720 police officers is really the thing that rules the roost for the overall, development of your premium. So 0.67 is good. I mean, applaud yourselves. It's been outstanding. So it's safety, it's culture, it's all of that. So hats off to all of you. If you take a look at the premium, there is a slight increase in premium. Some of that's due to the payroll increase. There was a very nominal increase in the rate. And thus it's kind of a straightforward relationship as to what you're seeing here. I do want to give some light though. This particular year was not, I don't want to say an anomaly, and things happened to good insureds, is that you did have a loss ratio that was over 100%. What does that mean? It means that, there was more claims paid than your premium. And ultimately, that's going to have an effect when we start taking a look at your experience mod a year from now. So you're going to see that 0.67 go up because of utilization. I think your total aggregate of claims over this past year, thus to date, we got just two weeks left here, is about $65,000 in claims. So,
Commissioner Ansari.
I just got a question, probably more for our administration. I thought we contracted out our janitorial operations. Why are we paying employee compensation?
I'm guessing that's maintenance.
We have 3 staff.
We have 3 maintenance staff.
Oh, okay, it's not janitorial.
Yeah, I think they just classify it that way.
Okay.
yeah,
If you look at the numbers, that has to be our 3 maintenance staff.
And attorneys?
Yeah. Judge, prosecutors.
Okay,
Prosecuting attorney's office 3,
okay.
judge.
It's not our.
No.
No.
These are categories we have to put those personnel costs into.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wessel.
I move to recommend to the County Board of Commissioners to approve renewing a contract for 1 year with Peterson McGregor and Associates for workers' compensation coverage in the amount of $50,890. Funds to come from account ending in 954.000.
Okay, we have support. Any other statements or questions?
He answered my question. We had the unfortunate accident last year, and I was going to ask you when that would show up. And did you say next year that will show up?
Yes. So, Commissioner, your experience mod is a reflection of 3 years. It's a 3-year period. It does not count the most recent term. It gives some time for actuarial data to, and claim activity to be sent to the state of Michigan. Basically, they house it there. And again, I'm trying to simplify this. So next year, when we are in 2021, the year of 2019, which is what you talk about your experience mod in the year that you renew. So you are this 0.67 or this reality about 2019 is going to come onto your experience mod next year. That's where this claim is going to start to elevate this 0.67. So budgetarily, you'll want to account for some of that. And I can work behind the scenes to kind of maybe give a little bit of color as to what that might be a little bit closer. But
that's okay. We were lucky. So.
Okay. Commissioner Rush. You have to turn your thing on. Unmute it, I'm sorry.
Thank you. It would be nice to be able to plug in a number for our upcoming budget. So if you could give us an idea or a percentage that we could work with for this increase, so we can tentatively work with that number in our budget. Is that something that you can do?
yes, and again, I can work with Mr. Janik on that and get you some sort of perspective on what that could look like. Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions or statements? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, do the same sign. The motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much, Dennis.
Thank you. Take care.
So that would then bring us on to the Sheriff's Office acceptance of the 2020 State Marine Safety Grant.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So looking for the board to give us support for a state Michigan DNR Marine Safety Grant, $28,600 been approved. Just looking for your approval.
Commissioner Ansel.
I move to recommend the county accept the state funding for marine safety as outlined in the 2020 Marine Safety Grant Agreement in the amount of $28,600. Funds to be deposited in the account ending in 225.331, Marine Division.
Support.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, all those opposed, do the same sign. The motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, everybody.
Sheriff, I did have a question. In our claims and accounts, it seems like they are running to Traverse to get their oil changed. You know, is that, I mean, I thought we used to get it changed at Vans. Do they not do it anymore?
With the problem with vans is they're small operation and we go to the quick change places, so less time, less money, less wages. The one at Northwest Oil Company closed in Grelikville. There's problems with building. In fact, this week they just tore it down. And so we either go to the Ford dealership, which is, 5-7 miles down there, or we go to the Northwest Secondary spot. And and we're working on looking at, we have an individual in Sutton's Bay and one in Cedar who seem to have an interest in it. If we can make it such that we can call ahead, get an appointment, get in, get it done, fine, but sometimes it's cost prohibitive with wages just to wait around between this and that, so that's the only reason we did it. And I'm a local guy. Boy, if we have it local, I want to do local. I want to do local people, local businesses as much as possible. So
It just doesn't work out at Vans just because of how small they are.
honestly, it's a small operation. Now, they were doing our tire exchanges, so twice a year we went in, take winter tires off, put summer tires on, vice versa. And we had to store the tires, this, that, and the other. And if there's a call, we either have to pay someone overtime to come in to get service done, or if there's a call, we have no car available. By contract, we have to have somebody available. So it's nice when you can get in there, and if there's a problem, you get right out in 5 minutes, so. Sorry about the COVID here, but looking at one of the commissioners, he's got to get the barber tomorrow too. So, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
I just decided we were gonna start calling you the Fonz.
Jeez, that's yeah. Steve Baylor's giving me a hard time about giving me a package of cigarettes to roll up in my sleeve later. It's so long, it's crazy, but it is what it is. I'm not gonna do it if nobody else can, so wait my turn tomorrow. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Then that will bring us to the planning and community development.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hi. The first item I have for you today is to set a public hearing date. This is for closeout of a housing grant. It's actually titled our 2015 Housing Grant. And I got the email last week from MEDC. They actually took over some of the responsibility for MSHA. And they gave me a list of the things that they need to go through to make sure it's closed out. And one of them is the county needs to hold a closeout public hearing. So this is just a request for you to set one. I can't imagine this would last more than a few minutes. So whatever works for you is fine with me.
Commissioner Answer.
I move to recommend to set the public hearing date and time for closeout of the CDBG 2015 housing grant.
Support.
Commissioner Rettenbach.
Thank you. I was just going to support as well.
Okay.
So,
Commissioner Faulkner, do you have a question?
yes, do we want to set that, or will we set that Tuesday evening, or set it for?
Whatever works for you guys. I need to make sure that I have it in the paper at least 5 days before the public hearing. So if I just have enough time so I can get that notice to the paper, that works for
How
me.
about at the beginning of the July executive committee meeting? It should take only a few minutes. Do it at 9 a.m., whatever the second Tuesday of July is. I don't have the calendar in front
There
of me.
doesn't have to be action, just the public hearing, and then,
Yes,
yeah, okay.
What's the second Tuesday of
I
July?
think it's the 7th.
No, that's, seven's not the second Tuesday, it has to be the 14th.
Oh, that's the first.
Yeah,
That's always
So the
council 14th.
Yeah.
So how about 9 o'clock, July 14th, and then we'll proceed from that right into the executive committee?
July 14th.
Does that need to be in the motion?
Great. Commissioner Rushton, did you have a question?
Nope. I was going to suggest something similar, but that's been taken care of.
Is that a part of the motion or not? The actual
Does it
date?
have to be?
We can make it next week.
Make it next week.
We can make it next Tuesday.
Sure.
Any other questions or statements? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand.
All those opposed, the same sign. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item I have, it's actually 3 different items. They all relate to the remonumentation grant. And what I did was I took all the agreements that we put in place last year, sent them back to corporate counsel with the new amounts and the new corners that needed to be done, and asked them to update the agreements. And then for brevity in your packet, I only included one of those instead of including every single one. I have them on file. I'll have them ready for signatures Tuesday night and can email them if you want to see those. So the first one is the surveying agreement. There are 4 of them with Onan Land Surveying, Holmberg Land Survey, Grand Traverse Surveying, and Leelanau Land Surveying. The actual amounts are a little bit different for each because of their work elements. So that would, I've given you an example of a motion for those surveying agreements. Do you want,
Commissioner Ansel. I move to recommend approve the surveyor services agreement with Onan Land Surveying, Holmberg Land Survey, Grand Traverse Surveying, and Leelanau Land Surveying with costs to come from the remonumentation program.
Support. Any questions or statements? Commissioner Rushing.
Because there's been no mention of the amounts, I would like to amend this motion to include as presented or some similar language so we can refer back to this document.
I would amend my motion to reflect that the submission as submitted.
Thank you.
For a second, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or statements? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, do the same sign. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
okay. The next item then is for peer group agreements, and there are 3 of them for the same dollar amount with Onan Land Surveying, Holmberg Land Survey, and Grand Traverse Surveying. And there is a sample motion for you on the bottom of page 54 for those 3 peer group agreements.
Commissioner Ansel.
I move to recommend to approve the monumentation, remonumentation peer group agreement with Leelanau Land Surveying with costs to come from the remonumentation program as presented.
Support.
Okay.
Support by Commissioner Lautner.
I'm
Any other
That,
questions?
could I,
Go ahead.
that's actually the next one, which is fine if you want to handle that one first. That one's a little bit different because Leelanau Land Surveying is also the county rep. That's on page 55. That works. We can just back up to page 54 if you want after this one.
My mistake. Let me correct it. We'll do it in the order that it was presented.
Okay.
I'm sorry. That was my error.
Is that okay with a second?
Absolutely, but I thought that is the motion you read, was
No.
54?
No, I read the next one.
You read 55.
Oh, you did, okay.
So if I may,
Sure?
Yes.
Yes, okay, yes.
I would move to recommend to approve the monumentation, remonumentation peer group agreements with Onan Land Surveying, Holmberg Land Survey, and Grand Traverse Surveying with the cost to come from the remonumentation program as presented.
Mr. Chairman, point of order for clarification. Since there was a motion on the floor, does that have to be withdrawn? I think there was a motion and a second.
He did withdraw.
He did withdraw, maybe you didn't hear that.
Okay.
And then was okayed by the second to be withdrawn.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the point of order, that's fine. And so once that was withdrawn, then we could have a new motion placed. And that's what we've had done.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please do the same sign. Motion passes 7-0. Okay, so now we move on to page 55. Commissioner Ansel.
I move to recommend to approve the monumentation, remonumentation peer group agreement with Leelanau Land Surveying with costs to come from the remonumentation program as presented.
Support.
Any questions or statements? All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, do the same sign. Motion passes 7-0.
Before we move on, I just want to compliment Shirley publicly for taking on this project. As you know, she volunteered to take this on when Mrs. Miller chose not to proceed with it, and has done a great job. She has restructured it and has had meetings with other surveyors and so forth. And just thank you, Judy, for all your extra efforts.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. I have one more item for you today, and that is from the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. And the request is basically to just kind of get your approval to start working on an application for EPA, a grant for submittal. And the reason this is coming to you now without an actual grant is that there's a lot of work involved to put together this type of a grant application. And it has to come through the board, it has to be approved by the board for submittal to EPA. And the Brownfield Authority didn't want to start working on something that perhaps you might not want to support, spend a lot of time and effort on it, and then it doesn't go anywhere. So what we're looking at is a submittal of another assessment grant. Leelanau County has been very successful in this area, and we have quite a few properties in the county that are still asking for assistance. So we'd like to try to get another assessment grant through EPA if you are in favor of us, going down that path. So basically just approval right now for us to start on that process.
Commissioner Redenbaugh.
I would recommend to the Board of Commissioners to permit the Leelanau County Brownfield Redevelopment Authority to prepare a grant application for brownfield assistance with the LCRA, presenting the application to the county board at a future date for approval.
Support.
Commissioner Ansari.
These assessment grants to assess properties for contamination or whatever, isn't that meant to be like a rolling fund? What happened to the money that we had before? Wasn't that money supposedly, yeah, we spend it and then we gain it back through tax increment funding or whatever, and then we have that money available to use again on the next project. So why are we asking for new money?
Good question. So there's two different types of grants. One of them was the revolving loan fund, which is actually a grant to the county that we put out in loans, and then when those are repaid on a project, we can use it again. We only used it on one project, and we're still waiting for TIF dollars to be at a level where we can recapture. The others, as far as assessment grants, you're right, we can recapture those, but only on sites where we've used them, where we've put a brownfield plan in place. So we're limited on those. If we've done an assessment and found out there's no contamination, for instance, or very little, there's no brownfield plan put in place, we do not recapture those grant dollars.
And they're just gone.
Right. Right. We can certainly look at that as we move forward in this next round. If we are successful, is a better way to try to recapture those funds, perhaps with an agreement with the property owner or the new developer.
That's kind of where I'm going with this is, what does, Eagle or whoever it is, that gives us the money to do this? What is their perspective on this? Do they expect that, we're just going to keep spending this money and never getting it back? Is that part of the expectation out there? Do they expect that, this is going to happen and it's just gone?
It's through EPA, and in the beginning years when we first received the grants, it was to use them on the properties. As time went on, it was to use them and also figure out a way of how you can self-sustain that program, which is what we've tried to do on some of these brownfield plans, is to capture the TIF. We are capturing it on some of the projects, but not to a level where we can really put it back in and have thousands of dollars ready to go out the door again. So we're getting some back in, but it's pretty minor right now.
Because when I look at this and, read the instruction or the write-up associated with this, when we start getting out into some of the ag areas and looking at some of those things, I anticipate that we will never see a brownfield plan for those locations. That money will be gone unless we come up with some of the mechanism, because, they're not out there looking to develop that land. They're not going to want to spend that money, even though they may be in favor of cleaning up some of that activity if it's found. So, I'm struggling with this, that I don't want to take money from a grant with the expectation is there that we're going to recover that, and there's no plan to recover it. I'm just leery about that.
I think those are good comments, good questions, and as we move forward, if this is approved, as we move forward with the grant application, we can take that into consideration and try to get that written into the application of how we will reuse funds or, recapture funds to continue with the program.
Do we know how much we're gonna ask for? Because there's no dollar amount.
The maximum is $400,000 that you can ask for. We haven't determined that yet.
Commissioner Rushton.
Yes, Trudy, you had mentioned that you had several requests, several property owner requests, and I was wondering what that number looks like.
What the dollar number looks like, or the number
the
of
applications.
We do not have the applications in yet. We've had interest from individuals, but when we've told them that we're out of money, then of course they don't apply because we don't have any funds to help them with right now.
And can these funds be used for PFAS contamination?
The petroleum funds could not. I'm going to assume that under the hazardous materials portion of the grant that they could be, but I would double check that with our environmental consultant.
Thank you.
Any other questions or statements? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, then that brings us to the Treasury Equalization Title Search bid update.
I was going to quick update. The treasurer is partnering with Lori Spencer and looking for a company to assist them with some of the complex title searches. Bids are due actually Friday, so you'll get an update next week on this.
Just want to move this forward?
Yeah.
Do we need a motion to do that?
But yes, so we'll put it, so it'll be on the agenda, yes. So you move.
I so move.
Okay. We have 2 supports. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, the same sign. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
Take a break. I don't see Matt. I'll call him.
All right, let's take a 5-minute break. Well, let's go till 10:30 and we'll come back. We'll go get Matt Mansorgi while we're on break. Thank you. Some more coffee.
There's Matt. I'm just taking a break.
Okay.
Morning.
Thank you for being here and thank you for your comment.
Yeah, thank you.
Hopefully the Fisher restaurant will do the post
You gotta put it on when you walk through the building.
I agree with everything you said.
Yeah.
But the problem is, we just changed it.
I know, I heard that.
Well,
Well, you went to 5 versus 3.
Right, but I was totally opposed to changing because we had excellent people in there, but they left because they just didn't want to deal with it going to 5.
Well,
So the
actually,
last 3 years, we've just totally.
the nice thing about 5 is easier to have a quorum. If you've got members.
That was their reason, that's what they said, it's easier, and we don't have to, when 2 of them meet, they're not violating the Open Meetings Act. It was running perfectly, we didn't have any problems.
Well, it was skating running, except for the fact that many of the counties had pay scales out of whack.
Yeah.
Muskegon had theirs at,
Pit Road Tower, have a.
full health care, full retirement benefits. What? Up down there, they go to nursing home.
Right.
I was doing the meeting twice a month, I don't know why. there's no need for twice a month. With work sessions occasionally as needed. We had a guy by the name of Mr. Bender, I can't remember his first name. He came in and held it, and he's a professional. He held a lot of meetings. He came and
That's what they need.
he set forth our meetings, and then he critiqued our meetings. He had a work session. He came in and told us what we did wrong, how the chair should
recommend that to him.
how the chair should perform. And
That email this morning.
We love it when you get a public comment. The answer back, your comments are forward.
Yeah.
And then maybe direct them to the director.
Right.
Finance.
Don't have an argument there with them.
I like the way. It looks very organized out there.
Yeah, it does look pretty good.
The road is.
I want to make sure.
Deeded
Yeah,
road.
what talk?
The various townships.
Other talk coming up on the.
Oh, no, thank you, thanks. That's yummy.
Former editor, of the publishing book in Kent State.
Yeah,
I know.
I bought it.
Did you,
Yeah.
he's going to do a online author talk?
Kyle, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just bought it from Big Book.
Send you the link.
Yeah, I haven't started reading it yet, but
I gotta go see Tracy Ty, you gotta see.
Yeah.
You gotta see the same packet.
It's got cold in here, Chad.
what's that?
Cold in here.
No.
This is from Tracy.
One. Burr.
It's all relative, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess.
Or what's cold and what's hot. Boy, last night it was just
Yeah.
hot. I had just no
I'm
energy.
gonna go see
Oh,
her.
yeah, I was down in my garden.
Asking me to rate these areas.
Just trying to get everything more consistent.
Oh, for the planning?
Yeah.
I did not answer.
Tried to get everything a little bit of a train.
So our neighbors gave us some library.
Agenda for them, I think.
Well, you're not on the plan.
So Jim on the planet.
Okay, that's good. I think it's
Linda is.
Okay, I'll tell you her.
Okay.
Aren't you gonna do that
All right.
this evening?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sure. Okay. One was. Flooding.
Oh, yeah.
So it took me forever. I did it though. When I got done, it was just.
Yeah.
You know, just that.
Thank you.
Vibrates.
Uh-huh.
Just tell the new guy it's part of his job.
Well, the trees are out.
Good.
You're on the planning board.
Yeah.
Did you receive the same packet? You're supposed to read all these things, 1 through 2, 1 through.
I just got that, I haven't read it yet because I was reading this back, 800 pages.
Well, I guess I'll have to have Trudy explain it to me, because
Okay.
it's not in the, anything I've read up to date.
Okay. Yeah, I can't help you with it today.
Did the damage project get a grant?
We're going to pretty good place.
Well, that's it. Applied for it, I didn't have to copy. And it's still hung up.
You're not gonna be asked to go.
You mean for the repairs where we did the camera
Well, I
and
think I'm talking about repairs here. The roof.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right.
I'm not positive that we applied for a grant for that.
I think we're okay.
Okay, I guess I'll
Let's go
talk
back
to
and-
Trudy, maybe she can explain this, they're supposed to rate all those various areas.
Yeah, I guess I don't remember, I'll have to ask her too.
She wants it returned on 17.
Well, I think that
I can do that, but I need a little more explanation.
Right, right now.
All right.
Just put it on.
Kind of like that.
I think we want to pass it so that it is the,
Summers and Sons Day.
Is closing in schools and stuff and.
I know, you just fall down, where you kind of feel you don't feel guilty.
3 years.
I think you can either kind of.
Is that what the rule is?
Was she the one that did the airport?
Yes.
I did, yes.
These kids all have issues, you know.
It was kind of that way to start.
Just such a bad day.
Put in the paperwork, put in, and
I was trying to cut down some trees last night, and it's hot and sweaty. She texted me all these questions, I just said, I just give her quick answers, I said, you'll.
She likes to give the book.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to ignore her, but I was trying to cut these trees down. I'm sweaty like crazy. Melissa was concerned that we were gonna pass it. Just let me cut these trees down.
We'll get there.
But it's gonna give an update tomorrow. What did we do last night or this morning? You're not gonna surprise you.
Right.
Person that she could
That was it.
to agree with and work with individuals.
When I got done, I was sweating. My chainsaw kept getting caught up.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you're vibrating in there and it's hot and sweaty. We got some blackberry plants, some neighbors came on the plant on the spot where gotta take his trees down first.
Right.
Okay.
Gotta
No,
have
tonight.
sun. But tonight?
Tonight, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, okay, dear.
Well, guess what I did? I
Yeah,
cut some
cut down
down.
some trees.
One was easy, one was fairly small. But the other one was. You do? You sell your old one? Okay. Well, I saw that post, that sounds good. Well, good.
We had no choice.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got, and I appreciate your concern. You know, you got a tree. You'll make one, unfortunately, but that's all. Then we did it. Yep.
Missing down.
Well, good luck. Yeah. Miss Rushton, would we like to call us back to order?
Where is she?
Oh, no.
She's gone.
She goes off into the sunset. We'll give her 1 minute, Karen.
Chet, you got her number? You can call her?
Yeah, just gonna do that.
Well, we're still on recess. I was just gonna let you know that Joe Polo is
There she
fourth
is.
in seniority. Mary Patterson's third,
Ah.
deputy.
There we go. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. That would bring us now to, where are we, emergency management, then the Aspen Wireless Tower Agreement.
Yeah, good morning. This agenda item is going to be an informational item now. Both parties have mutually agreed that there's going to be further negotiations with this contract, so this will come before you in the future. But the Aspen is motivated to get a deal done, and we will bring it to you when everything is finalized.
Matt, do you think it'll be next week, or you just want to move it to the July agenda?
We, depending on how quickly some of the negotiations go, if we can get it to you next week, I will, but I will not promise you that.
Next week, if you're not ready, we'll just move to the July.
Correct, correct.
Commissioner Lautner.
Thank you. I have found that the more I read and the more questions I ask, the more questions I have, and obviously, I think the more we're learning. And I had a couple more questions with this contract, but I don't have the old contracts with the other providers in front of me, and I'd like to compare them. And I was wondering if we could maybe have, rather than a special meeting, maybe a work session with you, and so that we could get back to some of the basics of it all before we move forward. So if it didn't hurt any ISPs at all, but I would say at least July, if we could fit a work session in first, because I'd like to know more. And I think that if we could have more of an informal, more questions and answers.
I'm good with
It would
that.
be helpful for all of us.
I agree because, you know, I think we might have a disconnect here as far as what we thought was happening, or at least what I thought was happening with these agreements and what the intent was. And what I'm getting at here is things like, you know, we lowered the rate to allow people, ISPs to get on here in order to encourage, you know, more people to be able to get access the internet and that kind of thing. And, you know, we need to look at this from, you know, from my perspective, from that view to say, okay, do we need to change what we're doing in order to make this happen? To standardize this for everybody, to say, you know, okay, vendor A, we signed an agreement with you, and you said you wanted space on all 5 towers, but you're not using it, and now we can't let anybody else on, that type of thing. You know, we did it to encourage, and we want to make sure that what our intent was is actually what's going to happen. So I second that concern that, you know, we need to, as a board, come to an agreement what our real intent was so that you know what you need to do. You know, I don't want you operating in a vacuum and doing this or that, and then all of a sudden, this isn't what we really intended.
Mm-hmm.
So.
We could do just the Tuesday, bring your calendars and pick a day to have a work session, work group. That'll give Matt more time to work on his contracts anyway, because we're not prepared this morning to propose any contracts.
Right, and I agree, but
Yeah.
I want us, you know, I think we should have a standardized contract
Oh,
that we
yeah.
use for whoever, and that it's fair for everybody, and it meets our intent of trying to get as many people out there with internet access as possible.
I think that's our goal too. Matt and I had numerous discussions with legal counsel, and I think we're all gonna say the same thing.
Commissioner Sotislow.
Yes, I am not in disagreement. I simply want to remind the board that there is a reason why the internet service providers who signed contracts were not on the towers. And that is because the county needed to do capability study for the towers. And that was started last fall, but it wasn't able to be completed because the gentleman who was doing it fell ill and went in the hospital. And it was picked up again in the spring. And again, the gentleman fell ill, went in the hospital, and then unfortunately later passed away. So Matt had to find someone else to actually pick up on that study and complete it. So our internet service providers who signed contracts have been waiting to be given authorization until that was completed. So just remember that when we're looking at why aren't people up on the towers, it's because they weren't allowed to.
Thank you. Commissioner Rushton.
Yes, I want to thank Commissioner Lautner for her leadership on this issue. I myself, I learned a lot of information from our last meeting with some of the internet providers. And with that said, I think as commissioners, we have a lot more to learn. We're looking at engaging different entities for different reasons, and we don't all understand the language, the acronyms, the processes. And as we construct new towers, I think it's very important that, as Tony suggested, maybe we standardize these contracts so that we are not allowing privilege to certain individuals without providing that same privilege to other vendors. So for me, I would really like to see it in-depth study session in regard to this, not just with contracts, but helping the commissioners to understand what this process is going to look like short and long term.
Let me work on it this week, and try to have some suggested dates to you in the next couple of days, and then we can finalize that date next Tuesday. But I will contact you this week. You can look at your calendars. I'll give you some suggested dates. You can get back to me, and then we can finalize the session next Tuesday evening. Is that satisfactory?
That sounds good.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I agree. I think that what I would like to do is, I think we need to, as a commission, we don't have a committee on this tower and internet and all of this. We've just read it individually as it comes through, and we haven't really looked at it as a whole. So I think it's going to be very helpful, and I agree. I want to make sure that we're providing protection on those frequencies for all our providers so that they all don't have to worry about the interruption and if the overlapping or whatever. They've all got to be able to do their business in our county, but under some sort of guarantee that they've got that from us, and I want to make sure we do that. And then also, I don't want to see us fall into a potential monopoly of this county, because, you know, capitalism is good, and I want to make sure that we protect ourselves that way, all the residents in the county. So I think there's just a lot. It's been really interesting. So I applaud you, Matt, for trying to stay on top of all this, because it's very complicated.
It is.
You start talking frequencies and gigahertz and megahertz, and so this would be good for us as a commission to really educate ourselves on it.
Well, based on that, actually, the next 5 items were just updates from Matt. We're not asking you to vote on those. So maybe Matt, you can just give a brief overview of each topic, and then we'll set up a special meeting sometime in the near future to have a more in-depth discussion. Actually, it worked out well because Matt and I, lengthy discussions, we're a legal counsel. Matt and I had a lengthy discussion with Mr. Malone yesterday, how to go forward. And truly, we are trying to treat everyone the same. It gets a little complicated, but we are trying to, I think we're all saying the same thing. And you're right, it is a huge learning curve for most of us. And so I think that'd be a good idea. And I think the providers would appreciate that also. Because I learned a lot just from talking to Mr. Malone yesterday.
Absolutely.
On the phone, stuff I did not know that he's been going through. So I think it'd be good for all of us to do that.
Commissioner Rushton.
Yes, the administrator indicated that this would be a special meeting. And I am not looking for a special meeting. I am looking for a workshop type meeting.
Yeah, that's what I meant, yes. Workshop.
Okay, I just wanted that clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm thinking, and I think this was what Commissioner Lowry was pointing to, just a workshop study session, more of a relaxed atmosphere, kind of the same format we use during our budget process in the summertime, where you can ask questions back and forth and have dialogue without being a formal meeting, so no action can be taken at that time. And Matt, maybe we can get Mr. Stoker online also to talk about the legal consequences.
Yeah.
Because he has a lot of input, a lot of knowledge on this too, so I think it could be a learning session where you have different people present, you have a chance to ask questions back and forth. All right, I'll try to get some dates here in the next couple of days. But Matt, you want to just give a brief update on this?
So moving on with some of the updates and clarifications, one of the items that we discussed in the 29th meeting was the structural analysis fee. It is kind of a big chunk to bite off for the ISPs. It is recommended by our insurance provider, and it is a board stance that we charge that $5,000 fee per time that they want to update their equipment. Now, I did some discussions with our tower consultant, and we're always going to have to pay the engineer, and we're going to have to pay the consultant in order to verify things were done correctly. So if we did have to lessen that cost, we would probably only be able to go to half. So it would be a $2,500 fee instead of $5,000. I think that's probably going to need a board decision on that, so which we can push to next meeting if you like, or we can discuss it in the work session a little further.
That's what I would like.
That's fine.
I have more questions about that too. So.
Not a problem.
Okay.
All right. So the government center tower bid update, We do have, the RFP process is open right now. The deadline is Monday, the 15th. We had a deadline for questions to be asked this past Friday. We do have some intent to bid letters from some firms, but no bids have been received right now. We do expect them to come in this week. But we will be opening those next Monday, and depending on how that opening goes, how many submissions we have, we can give an update to the board at the Tuesday night meeting.
If you move that item forward to next Tuesday night, we may not do it in vote, but I think you'd want an update on the cost of bids work.
So, I recommend we move it forward to Tuesday night.
Right. And
Government Center bid tower update.
Yeah. Does someone second that? So I guess my question is, do we want to add that we put about a workshop on the agenda too?
Well, a workshop you don't have to vote on, so let me just get some dates and try to get all of you to agree upon, and then we can finalize it next Tuesday night, just announce it.
Okay.
Because it's not a formal meeting.
All right. So we don't have to have 3 people sign,
No,
or
no,
we don't have
it's
to
a
just
workshop.
set up a workshop?
Because there'll be no action.
The budget?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll use the same process we do for the budget. We'll
All right.
post it, obviously, and so forth. We'll try to get a date reserved in the next couple of days for you.
Okay. All right. So that brings the EDA. Oh, Commissioner Ansel, I'm sorry.
Are we going to invite vendors to attend that workshop to educate us? I'm just asking the question because that will have an impact on scheduling.
I'm assuming that we will. I
Okay.
assume we want their input.
All right.
There are teachers.
That would be my intent.
Yeah, I was assuming, yes, that we would invite them.
They're the experts. Say.
I agree with Commissioner Walter. The meeting we had on Will's birthday was very informative.
Thank you.
The only thing I have to say is I'm not looking to become an expert. I think we just need to set the policy that's equitable and works, and then go from there, because I'm never going to become an expert on this stuff, and I don't really have an intent to. I just want to I think we should be looking at how we should do our policy instead of knowing how gigahertz and all of this works. I think we're going beyond what is the purpose of the commission. To me, if we start becoming experts on it. Commissioner Rushton. You got to turn you're muted.
Don't you?
There,
Thank
now
you.
you're on.
I disagree with that statement. I disagree with that statement because how can we set policy when we don't have an understanding of the issues? And my objective is to get an understanding of the issues so that when we do create policy, we are not creating obstacles or an unfair playing field or other issues. So I think that we need to be, I don't want to be an expert. I agree with that statement. However, we have to have enough information so that we can make good policy that works for all.
Commissioner Ansel. That's what I was going to say. All right. That's fair. Then, so we have a motion on the table. So all those in favor, what is the motion, please?
Just to move forward the tower bid.
The tower bid, to look at it for next Tuesday. Is there any, Commissioner Rettenbach?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the motion? I'm unclear about where we are on the agenda.
We're simply, we're on Government Center Tower bid update, just to move this forward to next Tuesday, because bids are due next Monday, so we can give you an update what the bids were. I'm sure we will not be ready to make a recommendation, but at least you have that information.
Okay, so now,
I'm sorry, we didn't hear you there, Commissioner Rettenbach?
I said, I understand where we are now, 9C, and
Oh, okay. All right. Any other questions, statements? All those in favor, say aye, raise your right hand. Yeah, your hand. All right. All those opposed, do the same sign. The motion passes 7-0. Sorry. All right, then, where are we at? The
DA.
DEA grant update?
The grant update is still not prepared. So Commissioner Sotis Little, did you have any updated information other than
Sure.
where we stand?
The draft grant proposal is progressing very well. We're now in the process of gathering letters of support. Next, we'll be incorporating data from the survey that went out recently to businesses that have been filed with the clerk's office is doing business as. New survey is going to provide current information on internet efficiency for those folks doing home-based businesses. And it's also picking up some data from employees who are working from home during the pandemic study, during the at-home work period. The mailed surveys have been coming in daily and a lot of work, but good work. And a number of people are opting to complete the survey online as well. So we're seeing a good distribution of location across the county and a definite expressed need for increased speed capabilities, increased service. We've started on the data analysis and that we have received thus far. So that will be incorporated into the grant along with other implications that the data may have for including other aspects. Any questions?
I was just, I do have one question about, it's just about for businesses then, it's not for like homeschooling or that kind of thing, because, I mean, that seems to be an important thing now.
Yes, it's targeted, the Economic Development Administration targets for businesses. However, there is a clause in their NOFO, their Notice of Funding Opportunity, that states that areas that have been impacted by the COVID virus can also be included. And we know that we've had impact from our schools dramatically. So we are including that. We did have some of the libraries contact and see about potential collaboration between this grant and grants they're proposing. And since telemedicine and training is another heavy aspect of the EDA grant, we're trying to see which of those pieces we can incorporate to make the grant even stronger. Does that answer your question, Will?
Yes, it does. Thank you. So
Just information.
Okay.
Yep.
So then we would move on to the Cherry Capital Connection contract clarification.
All right. Through the numerous conversations I had with legal counsel, we did discover that we're still in the negotiation phase with Cherry Capital Connection. Now, the good news is we're still moving forward to have a relationship with Cherry Capital Connection for them to expand their footprint for the citizens of Leelanau County. And none of their current customers have been negatively affected by this. So I'm confident that we will be able to have a determination back from legal counsel so that the board chair can sign this contract.
So do we need to move this forward to next Tuesday or not?
The likelihood. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Matt? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right. That brings us to County Parks and Rec approval of resolution. I don't know. Sure. Commissioner Wetzel.
I move to recommend to the County Board of Commissioners to approve the Leelanau County Resolution 2020 XXX Michigan Department of Natural Resources Recreation Passport Grant, Veronica Valley Park Universal Improvements, as presented.
Support for discussion.
Commissioner Wetzel.
We have talked about this plan on numerous occasions. We've been working with a consultant. We've been working with the Parks and Recreation Commission. We know we have some good plans for Veronica Valley. It does require, as stated in the resolution, a match from the county commission, the county government, of $50,000. That is way down from what this group approved a year ago. And we have, last year, you did approve this grant, but we have reduced the scope of the grant and reduced the match. And I believe it's accurate that this was a unanimous recommendation on the part of the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Commissioner Law.
Okay. Right now, this is just applying for the grant. This is really difficult because Parks has put a lot of work. We got a lot behind this grant. We've worked on it for a long time. We've got resources behind it, and it would be a great thing. I am concerned about the $50,000 match if it's awarded, and so I'm going to support this today, and I'll support it Tuesday night to move forward. But we'll have our homework done finding that $50,000 if we are awarded this grant. So we're going to have to maybe be quite creative and think outside the box, and outside the box perhaps being outside county funds for that $50,000 matching grant. So it's just kind of I'll throw that out there. It's going to be difficult for us, I think.
Commissioner Ansel.
We already approved this once. We just didn't do it by resolution. And Mike, don't we have, is it Gosley Zubek heading this up for us? We paid them. Why did we not do it the right way the first time is my question. You know, if you're paying a consultant, and Gosley Zubek has done many of these grant applications. I know they did it in Elmwood Township, and they know the process that you have to follow to do it. That's why we're paying them that consulting fee. And yet here we are reproducing something we already approved because we didn't do it the right way the first time. It's a problem.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, but Commissioner Rushton had her hand up. So Commissioner Rushton.
You know, I have always been concerned about the amount of money that has to come from the general fund for this park project. We support our parks and recs with a pretty healthy budget. And a lot of things have changed over the last year, and a lot of things are going to change over the next 2 to 3 years as far as our budget is concerned. We should be talking about hiring freezes. We should be talking about our finances. We should be talking about a lot of things before we start spending $50,000 on something that is not necessary at this time. It's not that I don't support the improvement of parks. However, the timing is terrible. I recognize that they've put a lot of effort and time in this. But I think this board approving these kind of dollars for this type of a program at this time is not in the best interest of the citizens of our community. I will not be supporting this today.
The reason this was added to this agenda is because the Parks did not hold a meeting due to the COVID issues for about, was it March and April? Right, for 2 months. We did not know that this resolution should have gone hat in hand with the proposal, the recommendation from the Parks Board until after the board had met to actually approve that rather lengthy discussion on moving this grant application forward. As such, all we're asking is a little housekeeping and have this resolution approved today.
Commissioner West.
The Commissioner Lautner said it. We really are just seeking approval to support this resolution. If we get the grant, we'll have a better understanding of our budget situation and where the money would come from, and we could make the decision at that time. So this is just requesting support for the resolution and allowing us to support that application. It's not committing any funds. Correct?
Commissioner Rushing.
I think it's going to be pretty hard for the board to deny the Parks Department the grant when it comes in. I think it's a difficult decision, and I guess it depends on where the priorities are for these board members.
Any other comments? We'll just have this regular vote today. Will have to be a roll call on Tuesday for the resolution. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, all those opposed, same sign. So the motion passes 4-3. All right, thank you. Then we move on to administration.
Yes, it's that time of year where we're starting the budget process for 2021. We look at the schedule. We have a tentative schedule on page 87. Obviously, it's subject to change as we get closer, but look at the proposed dates. Our first budget meeting would be July 30th. If you have conflicts, if you could let us know during the month, your schedules for mid-July through end of August. If you know there's times that you are not available, if you could email that to me so we can come up with a schedule. Obviously, we do this every year. It changes based on your schedules also, but just want to give you a time frame and let you know we are starting the budget process. I assume we're going to use the same process in the past where we provide an updates to all of you, and then any new projects or questions or concerns that you have, we would bring those people in and have them present. And once again, we have to make a decision by the end of September and vote in October. Our meetings are the first and second Tuesdays of the month. So it's a normal process. In the past, obviously, I think there's a lot of challenges coming up forward that we have to discuss, but we are starting the process, and we're confident we'll be ready towards the end of July to start meeting with the board. So just take a look at these calendars, and if you could, email me dates that you know you're not available in August through mid-September.
Commissioner Rushing.
Yes, I understand that you're going to reach out to the different departments on June 12th. However, I do not think that the board has had an opportunity to weigh in on the message that needs to be sent to the department heads in lieu of the anticipated loss of state and federal funding for the following year. I would like to see this board have a brief conversation on giving some direction to those departments as far as their budgets for this year or their hiring practices this year. You know, whether we implement a freeze for new hires, if we look at not replacing those that have left.
That's actually next on the agenda, Commissioner Rushton.
Okay. Do we have an anticipated, I mean, are we going to go into this idea with a budget cut of 10%, 20%, 30%? Are they aware of this at this time?
Yes, we've got no staff meetings. Part of it is we really have to wait to see what happens at the state and federal level. And obviously, we normally don't start budget meetings in July, but what happens at the state and federal level will have an impact on the county level. So right now, it's difficult to predict how we're going to go forward, but we want to start the process where we've had department heads meeting. I'm having one this week also with them to talk about the budget process. Everyone's aware of the unique circumstances this year. I think people are gonna be very conservative. In terms of personnel, that's the next thing, it's on the budget agenda that I wanna talk about. But this is just to start the process. We need to get the ball rolling. People are gonna be very careful about any type of new request. But really, when it comes to the finances for next year going forward, a lot of that is contingent on what happens at the state and federal level. So right now, it's very difficult to predict what will happen. I'm sure if we have our first meeting towards the end of July, we'll have a much better idea by then.
Commissioner Long.
Yes, thank you. I had some of the same thought process or concerns as we send those out. So in other words, rather than maybe a percentage cut across the board, because I think that's sometimes very difficult depending on the department, but maybe education line, and maybe let the department heads know that we may not be approving education, we may not be approving any travel. You know, maybe we'll be doing mileage instead of cars where possible. I don't know.
Well, the good thing is we have 4 months to have this discussion. Once again, we approve it in October, so I'm sure we'll have many special meetings in, especially August and September, to go over these issues. But until the state and federal government comes up with the budget, it's very difficult for us. We're gonna go forward and be very conservative with our proposals. However, everyone is aware, every department head, every elected official knows it's a very fluid process and subject to change. Depends on what happens at the state and federal level.
So is the packet the same as it's been every year that went out to department heads? Same back, the packet went out?
Yeah, we're doing the same
Okay.
process.
It hasn't gone out yet.
Yeah, we're,
But it's
right.
all formatted the same with the same verbiage.
Have it ready to go.
Control costs, no personnel. We can't stop them if they submit it.
But I think every department head, every elected officials know the circumstances, and I think we'll be very cognizant of any expenses, as they have been. As you know, we've put a freeze on expenses, and people have been very good about that. I haven't seen anything outstanding in this, so you need several of the conferences and travel, obviously have been canceled, conferences have been canceled and so forth. So I think our staff is very much aware of the situation.
Okay.
And about personnel, that's actually the next thing I put on the agenda.
Any other questions or statements? All right, then we would move on then to personnel vacancies and clarification.
Yeah, thank you. Under normal circumstances, what happens is the board sets a budget for the upcoming year and includes personnel staffing level. If there's a vacancy during that budget year, the department head, the elected official does not come back to the board. They just have the option to fill it based on the staffing levels. That's the normal process. Obviously, these are unique times. At our special meeting in May, we talked about potential budget freeze, personnel hiring freeze, not replacing as people left. I can tell you this has been a major topic with a lot of counties and going forward. And one of the things I want you to think about, and you can think about this, maybe have a lengthier discussion next Tuesday evening. Well, what some counties are doing is changing their policies for the rest of 2020 at this point, that anytime there's a vacancy, whether it's a retirement, whether someone quits, whether it's not been filled, that the board set a policy that those positions have to come to the county board first. It doesn't mean that you won't fill them, because obviously each position is different. But basically what this would do is means that any vacancy that comes forward before the elected official or the department head fills it, it has to get permission from the county board. So we have to change our budget policies. Several counties have done this. I can tell you there's been some law cases with elected officials, but the courts so far have ruled that the county boards do have the final authority on budgets. There's a case with downstate with an assistant prosecutor that quit. The prosecutor demanded the right to replace it. The county board says, no, we're putting a freeze on for this year. Wait. The courts have ruled you are a co-employer. You do set the budget. You do set the staffing levels. So if you wish to, I could draft a policy for next week to talk about not a freeze, but anytime there's a vacancy, whether it's the elected official, whether it's the department head, that person has to come to the board, state a rationale why they wish to go forward, and you make a decision on a case-by-case basis.
I support that. You want a motion?
We need a motion, yeah.
If you'd like to develop a policy by next week, I can try to do that.
Commissioner Ansari.
I would recommend to the Board of Commissioners that we have the administrator come up with a policy for next Tuesday night and in regards to any vacancies that become open either because of retirement or other reasons, that filling those vacancies in the county needs to come to the county board.
Is there a time limit on it, or is it gonna be just the?
Let me work on the policy and then we'll
Okay.
come back.
All right. Commissioner Redenbach?
I'll support that, and I just wanted to make it clear that it was through the end of 2020. At this point, I think that was what was clarified recently, so.
Yeah, I say 2020 because you're gonna start your budget process anyway. So that could be part of your budget rules for 2021. But yes, I'll talk about this year.
I would modify it to match.
And that, in second, that's all right. So we do have that. Did you be able to get that all right, Michelle? If you had other comments. Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, do the same sign. Motion passes 7-0. Commissioner Ansari.
In addition to that, we have already seen the state cut funding that they had already approved for this year. And if we could have those grants and funding sources that that we suspect may be affected, to inform the board of those things, so, not just for the rest of this year, but during our budget process to say, these things may change.
Yeah.
And we have already seen some changes of funding from the state. They've already said they're gonna.
As far as I know, maybe Michelle can help me. I'm not aware of anything that would impact us in 2020 yet, correct? Nothing that's been committed has been cut at this point, right? However, going forward for 21, yes, there could be many changes.
Well, I know Elmwood Township, their marina expansion money they just took it back.
Yes.
They said,
I believe the Cedar River project.
We already know the state is out there looking at that stuff to say, where can we cut?
Yes.
So we want to make sure that we at least recognize those things that could be, that we, thought we were getting money for and aren't, but may not get the money for. So if there's some way of looking at that.
I'm sure we can keep you updated, but also the MAC is very much on top of that. And I think all of you get your MAC updates, and I'm sure they'll be covering it also. But so far for this year, 2020, I'm not aware of any cuts at the state level for comments for our budget.
Right, and when we get into the budget process, the one thing you may want to look at is what is driven by grants and how much is the expenditure compared to what you're being reimbursed. Because in some cases, what used to be 100% is maybe 25% now.
Exactly.
And that, we provide that every year, but you may want to actually take more time to look at it. I think that's where you're going, because.
And when we're asking the department heads or elected officials, to come with their budget recommendations, they also need to realize, hey, some of this money is coming from grants, and what happens if we don't get the grant? They need to realize they could have real impact to them.
There's no one better than Jen Zawicki to keep an eye on that stuff, because she is a bulldog when it comes to every penny in that. So I'm sure we will give you updates on that.
But so are you talking about like the Marine Patrol grant that we just did, or the?
I wasn't thinking about that one, but that's about an $80,000 budget, and you get around 20-some thousand in.
Right.
It's popular. I mean, it serves a lot of water.
Right.
I wasn't necessarily thinking of that one, but that is the idea where you'll want to look at. Some services you're mandated to perform.
But we may not get a secondary patrol grant next year.
That's true.
Right.
Right, like TNT, I don't think we get anymore, do we? TNT, that's funded by us, but it's a valuable service.
It could be field funding though. There's no guarantee there'll be field funding.
Exactly.
At the federal or state level. So, yeah, so we will keep you updated.
Okay.
But I'm really hoping by the time we start budget process and towards the end of July, obviously the state and federal government have to make some tough choices in the next couple of months, so I think we'll have a better idea on which path we're on.
All right. So then that brings us to the 2020 board goal updates.
Yeah, we're almost halfway through the year. It says June already. So in your packet, you have the goals that were approved back in February here. And I don't know how much time was spent on them, but obviously we're going forward. The things that were not goals that we were going to do anyway is MERS payments we have done. Number 2 is obviously closely monitored budgets, and that's even more critical now than in the past. The HVAC project is, this phase is virtually done. We met yesterday about potential phase 2 and phase 3, knowing that finances may be hard, but next month we'll put out this agenda and we'll give you an update. Kirsten will be here to lay out the next steps, options in terms of timelines as well as cost. So you'll get an update on that next month. The Substance Abuse Coalition has been meeting. We did a Zoom meeting, and we had 30-some people that participated in it, which was fantastic. You'll be seeing a series of promotional material in the enterprise shortly. The big news is, and you'll have this on the July agenda, that with some arm twisting from Commissioner Rushton and Commissioner Wessel, that our person that's been heading this up, Greg McMurrow, has agreed to stay on for 6 more months. With some arm twisting there on our part, but he has just done a fantastic job, and he does so much behind the scenes. He attends many of those meetings in the 5 county areas, and been really keeping us updated, and I think everyone in our task force really wanted him back, and we're glad that he agreed to that, so we'll put that on the July agenda. He basically is volunteering his services for all the work that he does. Professional development opportunities, we've been continuing doing that. Obviously, things have been put on hold with the virus and the shutdown and so forth. And we have done some internal training. We did some with construction codes, building safety, and we're going to continue at some point to start that up again. So those things are, you all agree that we're just going to continue doing. There weren't goals. In terms of the goals, the one that you agreed on, I think there was some different perception of what this meant. It's environmental, research facts prior to any proposed environmental ordinances. I don't think we've had any discussions on that one this year. But obviously this has been a unique year with unique circumstances. Airport governance, I was very confident we'd meet that September 30th deadline until March 17th. Do you remember we actually had a special meeting here planned with the Grand Traverse County Board and the Airport Commission to really talk about the next steps, because I thought we're making great progress. I plan on talking to Mr. Klein and Mr. Elger this week, now that the Grand Traverse County is going to open up, and kind of talk about how we want to proceed with that, because everything's been put on hold, and obviously the airport has gone through a tremendous change since then in terms of their finances and the federal impact they're getting, and the potential liability to the counties if that did not occur. So I think we really need to look at that one carefully, but I think we'll have dialogue on that coming forward. On affordable housing, I don't know, Mr. Russell, if you want to say anything about that?
Well, I think the Housing Action Committee is making some progress, and I know that Trudy is prepared to, I think in July, make a presentation to the Board of Commissioners on what we're doing and where we're going and what we're suggesting. I think we'll hear more about that in July. We had a meeting yesterday with Housing North, which talked about one of the Housing Action Committee's goals is to not try to do everything ourselves, but partner with and use and collaborate with Housing North and the nonprofit. So we're really focused in the Housing Action Committee of just doing those things that I think most of us say is a county role. And it's not building buildings, it's helping townships and helping developers know they're invited to use our resources if they want to. We have made presentations to many of the townships relating to zoning, and those have been well received by the townships that we've talked to. And we stopped doing that when COVID hit. So you get a better update next month.
On broadband, obviously, this has been a focus and will continue to be a focus. I don't think there's much to add to this, but when you look at the goals we picked on 4 of them, I think we are looking at all of those. We are looking at federal grants, common language, tower options, and partnerships. So I think we are working on that one. On tax issues, we did finalize the senior services millage and the recycling fee. You've had discussion about reducing property taxes. So I think you have made progress on that one. So that's just a brief summary on the goals for this upcoming year under unique and trying circumstances.
Any comments or questions about it? Commissioner Westman.
Well, and Chet mentioned it, we are halfway through the year, and I appreciate the update. I'm hoping that within the next month or two, we might take a look at that environmental one and see what we all understand that to mean. And so I'd like to revisit that in the next month or two. I'm surprised about the airport governance that we're even thinking about moving forward on that now. I suspect that's going to get delayed.
Well, it could be that your decision is not to go forward either.
Right.
So,
Right.
but you will probably meet that deadline date at least. Like I said, I was confident we're gonna hit that September date until March 17th happened at the close.
Commissioner Rettenbach.
This is also a comment about the environmental goal, and it's just a kind of an update that the Glen Lake Association is starting to do enteric testing around the lake centered on new technology that the health department doesn't have a yet, and that it involves polymerase chain reaction, or qPCR, and with the new technology, detect and quantify DNA comes exclusively from septic systems. So the environmental health division of has been aware of this, made aware of this study. And I think that the goal at the health department is that they're trying to update the septic code for both counties at the same time, and that's something that they're going to be working on after having dealt with a lot of the critical things that have been going on with COVID. So that is something that's kind of in the works. I just wanted to update everyone.
I can also give an update on Leelanau Clean Water. As you know, in February, you voted to form a new partnership with them and have it done by July 1st. And I think we may actually meet that date, the deadline date. Obviously, it's been a challenge with the closure, but we have been meeting with their leadership team, Trudy and I, and they decided, and I think it really makes sense, and actually they feel very good about it too, that they're going to form an independent entity, Leelanau Clean Water. We will form a partnership with them so we can continue to support them if you choose. However, they will be a separate entity, and they feel comfortable because there's some goals and objectives that they wanted to meet that really did not fall within our broad spectrum. So the more they thought about it, they actually all agreed this is probably a good thing for everybody, for both sides. So we may not quite get there by July 1st, but we're very, very close.
Commissioner Weston.
This board did allocate money to the health department last year for the file digitization, updating the files. I would like to hear from them and get a report on that and see how many are there and what our issues are and what they've learned.
Okay.
We should get a report, but I do know it went extremely well.
Good, good.
So we'll ask for an update.
Let me see if I can get that on the July agenda, okay?
Commissioner Rettenbach.
At this time, all of the records have been digitized, so they are available now as of today.
Even after 1984 or something, or whatever it was, back to the 1970s and 60s?
Anything that they had.
Oh, that's great.
If they had it digitized, they are actually, well, we get the report, but
yeah,
it actually are getting more than they thought they would.
That's progress.
That's nice. That's
And they are so pleased that Benzie County is pushing to get theirs done now.
Sure.
Based on how well ours went.
Well, very good. All right, then that brings us then to tuition reimbursement process review.
Commissioner Walter had some questions,
Yeah.
concerns, I think.
Yeah, last month, we had a late agenda item placed in front of us, and that was tuition reimbursement. We were doing this all by Zoom, and I remember at the time, we couldn't go back without losing Zoom. It was hard to go back and reread the motion, because I asked the question of whether we had followed policy. And, well, I didn't ask that question exactly. I did ask questions on the policy. But what we basically did is approved, so the motion was that the Leelanau Board of Commissioners approved the payment of $510 for the reimbursement of employment-related tuition books for the spring semester of 2020. And further approves reimbursement for any future courses. So that is what does not fit our policy. So we kind of threw that out there, and we really shouldn't have. So my intent was to ask for a rescinding of this motion so that we can follow our policy. And our policy says that it has to be recommended by the department head, our administrator, and by the Board of Commissioners prior to enrollment of the course.
Yeah, let me give you an update, yes.
Okay.
There was an error in the process for Jennifer Hall, and let's keep her out of it to see. Mr. Rouse came aboard in 2018 requesting permission for her to take classes. The board said yes. She took the classes, I think got 4 points, passed, and got reimbursed. She did not take classes in 2019 because she was taking training here through the law enforcement. She took classes spring of 2020. Spring of 2020 is actually the winter. They call it the spring semester. Mr. Roush was under the impression that because you approved it in 2018, it continued forward. And so she actually submitted for reimbursement. That part we said, no, we cannot do this because it takes board motion. He was under the impression that the motion from 2018 carried forward. I said, no, it says needs approval class by class. So we did that in late edition. You approved it. She took spring, she took intro to business and police administration. Now I give her credit. She got straight 4 point on that. And then we said, okay, from future, you have to get permission for every class forward. However, at that point, she already signed up for classes for this mini summer and for this upcoming fall already. So for the summer right now, and she may be done already because summer sessions start actually in May and they're mini sessions. She took or is taking intro to psychology. In the fall, she signed up for contemporary ethical dilemmas and for gender and society 2 classes. We did tell Mr. Roush the motion he passed last month is only for 2020 for these classes. In the future, he and everybody else has to follow the exact procedure, which is ask in advance, get permission from the department head, the elected officials, the administrator, and then go to the board for approval. So basically, Mr. Roush here in that respect, he understands the process now. There's a bit of his defense. There was a case several years ago, and before I was here, I think Mrs. Welter remembers, the board gave blanket authority, and this individual just took classes for 5, 6 years and went back to the board. Since it happened one time in law enforcement, he was under the impression that he got permission for Ms. Hall to take classes, but the contract states it must be course by course, class by class. So that's where we came up with a compromise. Let's do a late addition to reimburse Ms. Hall for the winter spring classes and give her permission for this year only for the classes she already basically signed up for. But starting after that, they didn't follow the process, which is come to the board and ask for permission every semester.
So I guess my concern is we had that error one time, and that was an error. It had snuck through basically and got caught. We thought we had cleaned it up. I remember going back over this policy, making it very clear that you'd have to come back to us. So now here we are again. So I guess that's my question is, are we just going to let this ride through 2020, or do we want to follow our policy? you're saying we have an understanding that, well, it's done, we're just going to let it ride through 2020? Or do we want to go back and relook those? See, what you're telling me is the classes, you just read the list. You're okay with
Yeah,
department heads
she's
okay,
part of
so
the,
we just have.
it's part of the criminal justice program that she
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
So basically last month you gave her permission to take classes this fall by your motion. Which is 2-3 credit classes.
All right. Well, I just want to make sure that we continue to, that this doesn't happen
No,
another
we made it
time.
very clear to everybody, not just next door, but at the department, that if you wish to have someone employed to take classes, and we don't have that many that do, but we have had people, there is a process in place. You need to get permission in advance, because you get it one time does not mean it carries over.
So the, have the majority been employees that work nights, like over there, when it's slow? So studying during the business.
Well, the clerk's office had some employees take classes. I know when Miss Weaver was in the clerk's office, she took classes. We've had law enforcement people, we had a detective take a class. We've had, I can only think of 3 or 4 people that have taken advantage of this option since I've been here.
Commissioner Answer.
We have no precedent setting by doing this, that what we did is not a precedent setting thing that somebody else can come forward and say, hey,
No.
did it for her, you gotta approve it.
No, I mean, we basically did, what happened is Mr. Rouse should have asked for permission in advance. He was under impression, because he was involved with that West incident, that he did not need, he thought he had permission, or that Ms. Hall had permission to take classes. He now understands, everyone understands, you need to get permission in advance every time you wish to take an economic class.
We have communicated that to all the department
Yes.
heads and elected officials.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Commissioner Rushton.
Thank you. The repercussions for not following policy would be non-payment. Is that correct?
Yes, you have to approve, yes, you do have to approve the reimbursement. So a person has to get permission to take the class and then get board permission for the reimbursement. And that's why we withdrew it the previous month for the reimbursement. We didn't want to punish Ms. Hall, so therefore, last month was a late addition to get board approval. So yes, you would have to approve the reimbursement also.
And
So
how do we?
The procedure would be, you would have to get permission to take the class, and then the person, assuming they pass the class satisfactory, submits the invoice, and then you have to.
Commissioner Rushton.
I guess what I'm saying here is by not paying, we punish the employee. There are no sanctions against the department head for not following procedure. I don't necessarily expect every employee to understand all the policies. However, I do expect department heads to understand and review policy. And so with this policy, the way it's written, it hurts the employee, but it doesn't make the department head accountable. So is there a way we can rectify that?
I've had private discussions with the sheriff and undersheriff on this issue, and they fully understand the process now.
What about other departments?
Yes, we talked about it, yes. And really, it's every employee's responsibility to know our policies and procedures. But yes, I think everyone is aware of the process.
It is a great benefit for our employees, and I don't want to see it abused. I don't want to see us have to cut it. We may have to if we end up in a lot of financial straits over this whole pandemic, but it's a great program for those who do want to expand their education. But I hate to see it when I saw this once, I hate to see it a second time. And we were, as I said before, we were very clear when we reworked this policy how it was to be done. So it's disappointing that.
And there has to be checks and balances in place, because you don't want to give blanket authority, because that individual in theory could take any classes they want, or any degree they want. And I think that was a concern that happened, it was 10 years ago, I assume.
At least,
It was
yes.
about that time period, but it's clear that you have to get permission for every class taken in advance.
I think Commissioner Rushton has a valid point in that there's no responsibility for knowing the rules for the the head of the department.
That's a good
I
point.
mean, it seems to be we have all the policies in favor, but there's nothing to, if they make a mistake, there's nothing that's gonna check it, because it's the employee that gets punished.
Would that be up to the department head or the elected official to take action against that employee for not following procedure?
Well, or, I mean, can it be part of the policy that if it's not brought forward, that the administrator or who's ever head of that department pays 10% of the tuition?
Or 450.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know, I don't think you can
Have
do
a tough
that.
time with that.
Yeah.
I was just going to state that maybe this would be something you want to bring up in your budget process, because it's possible that there's budget line items for education that maybe could be whittled down, and in that point, that person would have to come with you because there's no money.
Good point.
Yeah, the way the contract is written, you have to get permission, so in theory, it could be reduced or limited to X hours.
Like
Also,
that.
All right. Thank you.
I think the policy and procedure are in place, are correct, unfortunately, we're just not following this time.
All right.
Not intentionally.
Understood.
I think lessons were learned.
Maybe.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Okay, so then that brings us to the 2019 audit report. We have Mr. Peacock here.
And there is Mr. Peacock, we see him on the screen.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I apologize about my COVID hair. I've heard COVID hair once on the meeting so far, but I don't like having this long of hair. And I recall in the 8th grade getting in serious trouble for this by my parents. So I got to find me a barber when we can get this thing opened up. So just real briefly, Raymond, as part of many folks in our profession, we are engaging in a return to work policy here at the firm. Our Florida and our Ohio offices have gone back into some minimum client contact. Michigan has not moved into that stage yet. So I apologize, I need to appear on Zoom. I would much rather be in front of you guys sitting at that table right there, but be that as it may, we will not be cleared to visit with clients probably for another week or 10 days. So what you have, as I understand, you have a copy of our audit report and our SAS letter. And what I'll do is go through this with you. I have I'm going to start with the audit report, if we could, please. That's going to be the item that has the blue cover. It says financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2019. Now I'm talking from my screen. I know you guys can see me, but as I'm talking from my screen, if somebody wants to interrupt me, please go ahead and do so. I can't see the Zoom call when I'm looking at my screen here. All right, so presented in front of you is the December 31st, 2019 audited financial statements for Leelanau County. Again, I am Steve Peacock. I'm an audit partner here in the Traverse City office, serving as one of the audit partners for the audit for Leelanau County. If I can direct your attention to page, this is page 1, let me see. Page 1, it is our first letterhead page, dated May the 18th. This is our independent auditor's report. First paragraph talks about the financial statements that we were engaged to audit, which is the December 31st, 2019 financial statements and the related notes to those financial statements, collectively known as your basic financial statements in the governmental accounting vernacular. Under management's responsibility for the financial statements, these are management's financial statements. These do not belong to Raymond. These financial statements belong to management, and our responsibility is then delineated in the next 3 paragraphs. Moving over to the top of page 2, kind of the summary there. We believe that the audit evidence we have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our audit opinions. And the audit opinion that follows, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities, business type activities, aggregate discretely presented component unit, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of Leelanau County as of December 31st, 2019, and the respective changes in financial position and where applicable cash flows, and the budgetary comparison for the general fund and the major special revenue fund for the year that ended, in accounting principles generally accepted in the U.S. It's a very long-winded answer of saying this is an unmodified report. This is the highest level of assurance that audit firms can place on financial statements. So that is a gold star right there. Next paragraph talks about the implementation of GASB 84. The county implemented GASB 84. There were no material changes as a result of this adoption. Ironically, shortly after the COVID crisis began, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board allowed people to delay implementation of all of the in-process accounting standards, but we were so far down the road with you guys, we just finished it up for Leelanau County and it's over. So you're all set there. Under required supplementary information, there are a series of financial statements and supplemental schedules that appear in the back of the financial statement as well as in the front where the management's discussion and analysis is. If you look at the last sentence in that paragraph, we do not express an opinion or provide any assurance on this information because the limited procedures do not provide us with sufficient evidence to do so. That relates to the management's discussion and analysis document, as well as the pension tables that appear after the footnotes. Those are the pension footnote, the pension information comes from the actuaries. We've not audited that. And the MD&A is prepared by management. We do read those to make sure they're consistent with the financial statements, but there is not assurance placed on those as part of the audit. Under other information, talks about the combining and individual fund statements. And if you go to the next page on page 3, top paragraph, last sentence, in our opinion, the combining and individual financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects in relation to the basic financial statements. So that those the supplemental schedules that appear after the pension disclosures are audited and are covered by the audit report. And then finally, there is what's called a yellow book audit report that follows at the very end of this document. It is a opinion on internal controls. So this just refers the reader to that, and we'll get back to that here shortly. Any questions on the opinion?
I just have a statement, Steve.
Yep, sure.
I just wanted to say thank you for finishing Leelanau County so that when we go into our budget process, we're going to have audited numbers.
Yep.
So I appreciate that. It helps us a lot. We always finish our budget on time. We're proud of that. And so I appreciate having those numbers.
I appreciate that. Thank you. We had to learn a different way how to audit clients in light of the COVID issue. So we had a lot. I mean, we have been on a bazillion Zoom meetings like you guys have. And honestly, if I have to go on another one, it's not going to be easy for me because I've been on so many of them. But it's just a different way of conducting business, at least temporarily. All right, on to page 16, if we could, the statement of net position. I generally don't comment on the MD&A. That is a document, again, prepared by management. So talk here from the total column. This is the primary government is Leelanau County. You've got governmental activities and business type activity funds. The component units, we'll talk about those in a minute. That's primarily going to be the road commission, which Raymond did audit this year. So we got both the primary and the component unit audits all covered through our audit procedures. So on the total column, you'll see $52.4 million of total assets comprised primarily of capital assets and then receivables and cash and investments. very healthy balance sheet on the asset side. Working down the document, you've got some deferred outflows of resources for pension amounts. Moving halfway down the balance sheet, you've got your liabilities, $17.2 million. And those are going to be consisting primarily of your pension liability and all of your long-term debt. Your accounts payable and your accrued expenses, those are pretty normal year over year. But the big numbers here are going to be the long-term debt, which is about $12 million, and then your pension, which is just under $4 million. Under deferred inflows for resources, you collected $1.4 million of tax dollars that were not that were for a subsequent period. So we basically deferred that revenue, and then there's some additional pension deferrals of $590,000. Overall, you come down to the net position of the county at $33.4 million. So that is a very healthy net position for a county. 33.4 million doesn't mean you have 33.4 million sitting in a bank account. What that means is you've got 17 million of that invested in capital assets. You've got 347,000 restricted for capital projects. You've got $3.7 million of state mandated program restrictions, and then unrestricted of 12.4. So there is a certain amount of that net assets that is carved out for specific purposes, but 12.4 at the end of December is unrestricted for the county. So it's a healthy balance sheet. Going to the statement of activities on the next page, this would also be akin to an income statement, if you would. Looks different in the governmental world than you would see in a commercial enterprise. Starts with expenses. You'll see total primary government expenses of $17.3 million. And then you sprinkle across the top the program revenues, charges for services, operating grants and contributions, capital grants and contributions. Far right-hand column, you see the total primary government had a net expense of $12,440,000. Then you start applying on the next page, those numbers carry over at the top of page 18. Then you start applying your general fund revenues such as property taxes, grants, unrestricted investment earnings, and so forth. So you had a $12.4 million net expense. You had $11.7 million of property tax and general revenues. Overall change in net position for a decrease in this net position of $724,000. So that would be akin to a loss on the balance sheet, or a loss on the income statement of $724,000. Leelanau County has had income in years, it's had losses in years. This 724 does not concern the audit firm. If we had several years in a row of this and you were eroding at fund balance, we might be having a different discussion at the table right now. But this 724 is not something that causes any hair on the back of my neck to stand up. As we've talked before, governments are privileged by having two balance sheets and two income statements. So beginning on page 20 is your second balance sheet. The statement of net position is balance sheet number 1. And then what we have here on page 20 is balance sheet number 2. And I'll talk specifically from the general fund. What you'll notice here is there's no fixed assets and there are no long-term debt obligations. So this is the old governmental accounting method of fund accounting. So you'll see here is your general fund has $9.2 million of assets, comprised principally of cash of 8.4, and then you've got a sprinkling of receivables and a little bit of prepaid items out there comprised of 9.2. Liabilities, $344,000. That's accounts payable and accrued liabilities. Get some deferred revenue of $170,000, and then you come down to the bottom, which is your fund balance of $8,688,760, of which $141,000 of that is non-expendable. So people ask me sometimes, and maybe it's curious to you, maybe it's not, but the two balance sheets are the Governmental Accounting Standards Board's to a way to merge old accounting rules with the new accounting rules. So I think in some point in time, you're going to see these fund statements go away, and we'll just be at a statement of net position and a statement of activities. But until then, we have to run with 2 balance sheets and 2 income statements. So if you go to page 23, what we have to do once the balance sheets are prepared is we have to reconcile those. And you'll see the reconciliation here between fund balance and then net position at the bottom. So this, all the different elements in here primarily are going to be capital asset activity, depreciation, unavailable revenue, long-term debt, et cetera. So once we know that we've got the 2 balance sheets laid down, we've got them reconciled, we're good to issue the report. So that's what that page 23 is. On page 24 is your second income statement. The statement of activities was your first income statement. On page 24 is your second income statement. Speaking from the general fund, $12.5 million of total revenue. Almost 90% of that is going to be in property taxes, charges for services and so forth. Then you go into your functional classification of expenditures, legislative, general government, judicial, public safety, et cetera. Total expenditures of $13,236,000. Overall expenses in excess of revenue by $754,000. You had some transfers in and out for net transfer out of $20,745. And we had a change in your fund balance of $775,000. Again, not something that, this is not a trend that I'm worried about. The county has had big years. It's had years where you've given some back. So this is a year where you're giving some back. On to page 27, as the reconciliation before, reconcile the 2 balance sheets. This reconciliation on 27 reconciles the income statements. And again, once we lay both income statements down and get the reconciling items determined, then we know we're in good shape and we're in balance, so we're ready to go. So very similar in composition in the reconciliation for the balance sheet. You're going to see capital asset activity, debt activity, and so forth. All right, beginning on page 28, state budget laws require us to have a original budget, final budget, actual, and then an over/under presentation of your general fund and any major special revenue funds. So here's your general fund on page 28. Were I a commissioner, where I would focus is on the second half of that page, far right-hand column. Any budget expenses that are in excess of what has been approved on your final budget are by state law reportable in the footnotes. So you'll see here under general government and under legislative, you're all good there. Everything is under budget there. Moving over to the next page. Under judicial, they are all under budget. Public safety is under budget. On to the next page. You're going to find health and welfare is under budget. Recreational and culture, other expenses. So as a whole, you are under expended by $854,024. And that's midway down page 30 on the far right-hand side. So that's another gold star. You don't have any budget expenses in excess of appropriation, so that's good.
Steve, right off the top of your head, where were we last year? Do you know? Or
As far as budget overages?
Yeah, just in that column, like where were we under last year also?
I think you were under, and you might have had 1 or 2 items last year that were over. I can look that up. Let me just take a second here.
You can get back to me. I was
Okay.
just curious.
That's fine. I know that you guys have not been a perpetual violator. We do have some clients that tend to have a lot of budget overages there. And, you know, the first couple times you do it, the state is they're going to send you a letter if you've got too many. You keep doing it, the state's going to have a different discussion with you. You're going to have to revise your budget procedures. So you guys are in good shape, and I've never concerned myself with you getting one of those nasty grams from the state. So hats off to your budgeting process as you embark upon the one for next year. I heard during the meeting that's going to be starting up quick. All right, on page 31, this is your senior services special revenue. You'll see that's also total, the health and welfare dollars under expended by 246,000. So you're good there. Now on to page 32. These are what they call proprietary funds, or these are funds that look, act, and smell like a commercial business. So the unpledged delinquent tax revolving fund, the building inspection fund, and a group of non-major enterprise funds comprise the third column there for a total on the right, second from the right-hand side. These are going to be your business type activities. So again, these look, act, and smell like a commercial business. So total assets on the total column, $7.5 million. A little bit of liabilities, 129,000. And then your net position is 7.4 million. So that's a very healthy balance sheet with respect to your proprietary funds. Continuing on to page 33, this is the income statement for your enterprise funds. Total operating revenue is $1,475,000. Operating expenses $832,000. You had operating income of $644,000. You had some investment income of $82,000. Transferred out $968,000 for a total change in net position. Again, second column from the right, third row from the bottom, $242,000 reduction in your net position. So clearly there was board action to transfer that money out, so that should not come as a surprise to any board members that there was a net decrease in your net position there. Moving on to page 34 and 35, proprietary funds are required to have cash flow statements. They are the only financial statement in a governmental report that is required to have that. This reconciles opening cash to ending cash through several different components. Again, going down the total column, I'm going to go in subtotals here. So $751,000 of cash was generated by those funds during their operations for 2019. So that's a good news. You generated cash. Now with that cash, what did you do with it? You transferred out $968,000 to other funds. Continuing on down that same column, you received interest of $82,000. Overall net change of cash and cash equivalents, it decreased by $134,000 from $6,464,000 to $6,329,000. So you won't find a cash flow statement anywhere else in this document. They're only required for your enterprise funds. And that cash flow statement is exactly what I would expect it to be like. You generate cash through operations, and then you guys decide what to do with it, whether it's to transfer it, buy capital assets, pay down debt, whatever the case may be. But you'll see the results of what happened in 19 on page 34. 35 is a supplemental reconciliation of the very first quarter, or the very first 25% of the previous page. Again, this is one of those things where we make sure reconcile it two different ways, and once you're in balance, you're good to go. So not much to comment with respect on 35. All right, so for fiduciary funds, this is going to be monies that the county holds on behalf of others. So you've got about $580,000 worth of cash that you are holding on behalf of another governmental unit. Could be local unit of government, could be the Internal Revenue Service, it could be any number of different things. And that's due to the governments is 572, and then you've got 7,400 for any individuals, organizations, and any other governmental units. On to page 37, you're going to see this is the activity of what happened in your fiduciary funds. You collected $21,255,000 during the year. You paid out $21,257,000 for a net change of 1,323. And if you look at the opening net position, it ties then back to the ending net position. Basically, these are funds you collect money and they should go in and out, other than some very small timing differences. This money doesn't sit on the books of the county for very long. Our last financial statements are those related to the component units. You'll see the three specific component units, the road commission, the brownfield, and the land bank. Overwhelmingly, the biggest activity here is going to be in your road commission, and we have issued our report thereon. And I believe Michelle and Chet and the folks have seen a copy of that report. If not, that is available online. That's been issued and filed with the state. So let's just talk from the total columns here. Total assets for the three component units, 40,255,000. A little bit, it's almost entirely of capital assets. You got a little bit of cash and some receivables, but almost all of that is capital assets, and that's the road commission, which would be your roads, your infrastructure, and so forth that comprise from the road commission. Deferred pension amounts, 31,000. Liabilities of 1,722,000. Those are primarily long-term obligations and your pension obligation. Likewise, there were some taxes collected by the road commission in advance of the year, so that's 1,349,000. Those will be expended in 2020. Overall, when you look at the net position of 37,193,000, which is comprised principally of investment in capital assets, primarily road commission, infrastructure, and then you've got the unrestricted portion of 2,237,000. So pretty healthy with respect to that. Discretely presented component unit income statements. That's on page 39. That will be the last formal financial statement that is part of your basic financial statements. Starts off on the total column on the right-hand side. First subtotal, 6,799,000 of total expenses, of which 6,659,000 of that is road commission monies. Revenues are the next subtotal, 7,057,000. 6.1 of that is going to be, 6.9 of that is road commission. Overall net revenue is 258,000. Then you apply your property tax, unrestricted investment earnings, and gain on capital asset activity. That totals 1,422,000. Overall increase in your net position for the component units up 1,679,000. When added to the beginning number, gets to your ending number of 37,193,000. I know you're drinking from a fire hose. Those are a lot of numbers to go through. Those are defined by the standards as your basic financial statements. Are there any questions with respect to those?
I guess I just have one quick one.
Yep.
Why do we combine brownfield and land bank with the road commission on those? Just because of the makeup of?
Yep. They are legally separate authorities. So they have to be defined under the accounting standards as a component unit. Sometimes component units can be blended where they just blend in like a department. The county has chosen over time to use these as discretely presented component units, which breaks them out in their own column format. You know, some of the small ones can be blended if they're small enough. I would have no problem with that. The road commission you can't blend because that's too big. But right. If there was ever a burn to get the other two, you know, get them out of the reporting model and blend them in with the county's financial statements, they're small enough where I could live with that. But showing them on their own equals their legal characteristics.
Yeah, that's more rather than blend them, just maybe show them on their own. But
right.
That's okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, now that was page 45 of the PDF. The next 30 pages or so are footnotes that support the balance sheets and the income statements and the cash flow statements that we just spoke about. I'm not going to go into a lot of significant detail here with these, but what I'll go over a couple of the more important ones. So on footnote number 1, beginning on page 42, you see the definition of the reporting unit. So you've got the road commission, brownfield redevelopment, land bank, as well as the county. Onto the next page, we talk about your regional joint operations, such as the health department, the airport commission, the court systems. If you look at in the middle of page 43, where it talks about government-wide and fund financial statements, if you would like more clearer or more information on why you have 2 balance sheets and why you have 2 income statements, this policy footnote here that starts on page 43 and it ends on page 45 will give you all the related information that you need to have as to why we do that. So very standard language with respect to those balance sheets and income statements. At the bottom of page 45, we now go into some very specific accounting policies as they relate to captions on the balance sheet. So deposits and investments, the county's policies are defined on the bottom of page 45. They carry over to the top of page 46. Likewise with receivables and payables, prepaid items, capital assets, round out page 46, assets held for resale, deferred outflows, compensated absences, long-term obligations, deferred inflows are disclosed in 47. 48 begins with fund equity. Inter-fund transactions conclude on 48. And then this policy note ends on 49 with a brief discussion about pensions and then the use of estimates. So those are the bulk of your major accounting policies. None of them were changed this year. They were all consistent year over year. So you have consistently applied those accounting standards to your general transactions throughout the year. Footnote number 2, this is where you would find any budget violations. If you look at the very last sentence on the, what's that?
Yeah, I had a quick question on capital assets. Is there any forward-looking change coming in regards to pricing capital assets at market value?
That's a great question. That is a constant dialogue in my profession. You know, the accountants came a long way when we were allowed to mark investments to fair market value. And there's always discussion about marking assets at fair value. And do I think it's going to happen in my 10 years that I have to go? Probably not, but it will consistently be a point of dialogue. Accountants don't like to write things up unless there's real reasons to do so. So I think the squeaky wheel needs to get a little bit squeakier before they make any kind of formal pronouncement to allow that.
Thank you.
Right now, your capital assets are capitalized at the historical cost and depreciated accordingly. So I just don't see that happening in my public accounting career. But budget or footnote number 2 talks about your budgetary. So if you look at the last sentence in the last paragraph, during the year ended December 31st, 19, the county had no expenditures in budgetary funds which were in excess of the amounts budgeted. That's great news. Footnote 3 talks about your deposits and your investments. Moving over to the next page kind of breaks out what those investments are, and as well as disclosing custodial credit risk for your deposits and for your investments. This footnote rounds out over onto page 51, where you have your fair value measurements in the categories 1, 2, and 3, which is the table there in the middle following fair value measurement. That footnote concludes on the top of page 52. Footnote 4 is a further description of your receivables and deferred inflows of resources. Next page, footnote 5, accounts payable and accrued liabilities are disclosed there. Interfund receivables round out footnote number 6. One of your lengthier footnotes is footnote number 7, which is a roll forward of your capital assets from the beginning of the year. Any additions, any deletions, and any transfers. That rolls to the far right-hand column for the year ending 12/31/19. At the top of page 56, you're going to get the distribution of depreciation expense throughout the financial statements. And then this next table here for fixed assets, this is road commission. So these numbers come directly off the road commission's report. Since there's such a significant amount of fixed assets at the road commission, we are required to put their activity in the footnotes as well. Footnote number 8 talks about your long-term debt. There were no issuances during the year. You're paying down everything according to terms. So that's your opening balance, your payments, and then ending balances and amounts due within 1 year.
Steve, I have a quick question.
Yep.
Do most counties not break up their capital investments as far as, FDIC insurance and all that? We got it all lumped together and we're just taking a risk that, it's not covered by federal insurance. Is that what most counties do, or do most counties break it up into little pieces so that it's all insured?
I've got clients who do both. Some are a little bit, have higher risk tolerance than others. And, there are several ways you can go about ensuring that. You can do that by breaking it up into several smaller amounts into other banks, into different banks. You can buy what's called collateralized deposits, where they will, the bank will specifically collateralize your deposits with certain assets of the banks. Those tend to be a little bit more expensive than stair-stepping monies in multiple banks. But, if you remember in 2008 and 2009, every Saturday morning you woke up, there were a series of bank failures. That's when the FDIC closes banks, is on Saturday mornings. And, we had clients who were invested in banks that the FDIC took over, and usually by Monday morning they're under the new name, and the deposit relationship is maintained, but it's scary. You don't know what's going on for 24, 48 hours with your money. Do I think we're in that environment today? If you would have asked me this 90 days ago, I would have said no. Now with COVID going on, I think you might want to have the treasurer look into some way to insure some of these deposits, because the banks are preparing for some substantial credit losses in their loan portfolios. And I think that it would be prudent to have some conversation with your bank on how to get those insured. So my pre-COVID answer was, I didn't have a lot of concern. My post-COVID answer is, I just don't know. So when I don't know, I say you talk to the bank and see if it would be what it would cost to collect or to secure those deposits.
Commissioner Lauder. Okay. Steve, on page 57.
Yep.
We've got the public place with the sewer disposal bonds, sewage disposal bonds, Northport. That's Northport?
Yes.
Okay. So we show, beginning, but where does it show, because that's being paid by Northport, so that doesn't have to show that money's coming in, or it doesn't show right here?
That's correct. It doesn't show as an addition, so it just shows you that your bond beginning balance was 7,190. Your deductions, meaning that it was paid out, that the bond received the payment. Yep. You're not going to see the in and the out of the county. You're seeing it on the bond record, and that's what the ending balance is. And they have a schedule that we give to the auditors. That's what they're getting this number from. Okay. And then the same thing with the law enforcement center.
7 more years on the law enforcement center and we'll be done.
That's what this shows, yes.
Okay, and then the next radio system?
The direct placement is the same. Yep, the radio system.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So that's.
All right. Any other questions? That's correct. Any other questions on that? Okay, moving forward, footnote number 9, risk management. Everybody has a risk management portfolio as far as what your tolerance is. we are required to disclose any significant risks that we found, and there were none. This is just talks about your member retention in your Michigan Municipal Risk Authority. There were no issues with respect to risks with the county. Number 10, contingent liabilities. Again, everybody's subject to pending lawsuits. The county is not exempt from that. So we have a brief discussion on that in footnote number 10. 11 is your property tax footnote, and that's very consistent year over year as to how you levy and what you do with the millage rates. All right, now footnote number 12, we start going into pension plans, and rather than going through 12, 13, or going to page 62, 63, I'm gonna skip all of this, and we're gonna go to the tables in the back when we get there. So let's skip through onto page, where to go here? Page 69. The pages we just skipped over are several pages and documents and language that talk about the various pension plans for the county and for the road commission, and the tables in the back have a very nice summary of that rather than going in paragraph by paragraph. So here is your communication tower leases on line footnote 13 on page 69. Page 70 is a further breakdown of your fund balance. So the numbers that were shown on the earlier statements, this is the detail of what's behind them. And footnote 15, this is your net investment in capital assets, which is basically capital assets less the debt associated therewith. Comes down to your net investment in capital assets. 16 talks about your adoption of GASB 84. And then footnote 17 is basically a risks and uncertainties footnote talking about COVID. You know, nobody knows where we're going to land with this thing when it gets all said and done. So there were no financial implications in your 19 audit. It is just simply a disclosure talking about the subsequent event. Any questions on the footnotes? All right, now let's talk real briefly on page 75. These are your pension footnotes. So those 6 or 7 pages that had all the language about plan participants and so forth, this all boils down to this particular table. So you'll see 19, 18, 17, 16, and 15. This is on page 75. Your total pension liability of 30 million, your pension net position, which is going to be the assets of the plan, your net pension liability in the middle, that's where I'd be focusing on. So you'll see back in 2015, you were 77.4% funded. You went up to 78.2. You're at 87.0. Took a little step back in 18, primarily from investment performance. And then now for 19, based upon the MERS actuarial report, you're at 87.1%. So you're making your way back up to the 90+%, which is good, which is better than a lot of other counties I see.
And that's just Leelanau County, that's not the road commission?
That's correct. The road commission will be on page, it is on page 78.
Okay.
Again, there's a lot of language in those footnotes, you guys, and there's a lot of minutia we could get into on these plans, but this, if I was sitting in your chair as an elected official, you know, how are we behaving with our liability is the most important question that I would want to answer. And these tables give you that, the result of where you're at. So with the road commission, you'll see back in 15, they had a $2,080,000 underfunding. They went up a little bit. And then they started chewing it down. So they went from 68.7% funded in 15, and now they're at 92.4%. So those are pretty good numbers. You know, I don't see a lot of counties that are getting into this 90% range, which is really hats off to you guys for doing that.
Their total liabilities only 7 million. So proportionately, we're doing just as well.
Right. Yep. And you're doing exactly what the actuary is telling you to do, so you're in compliance with that. You're putting additional monies away when you can, which is good. And, you know, hopefully we have some better stock market performance in 2020 than we had in the first quarter, and we can make up some more ground that way. All right, now on page 81 begins all the combining in the individual fund statements. I generally don't comment on those. There's a lot of minutia in there. But I can tell you we've audited that information and our opinions do cover that. So my next page we'll go into here is page here on page 123. This is what is called a yellow book audit report, which is a required audit opinion by the audit firm that talks about specifically about internal control over financial reporting. So if you look at this report, there's the discussion of the definition of what internal control is. They talk about deficiencies in internal control, you know, material weakness, significant deficiency, control deficiencies are the 3 grades of findings that you would have under this report. If you look at the top of page 124 paragraph, the last sentence in that paragraph, we did identify a certain deficiency in internal control described in the accompanying schedule of findings and responses that we consider to be a material weakness. That is going to be the financial preparation of financial statements and then adjusting journal entries, finding that we've had with you guys for several years. And that came out after the Enron debacle and the change in the audit standards. So that finding should not be a stranger to anybody. Under the next paragraph, under compliance and other matters, last sentence, the results of our testing disclose no instances of non-compliance or other matters that are required to be reported under governmental accounting standards or auditing standards. So that was good. Now, if you look at page 125, this talks about this finding, which is your audit adjustments and the preparation of financial statements. And again, this finding would go away if you had a CPA on staff that prepared the document cover to cover, was current with continuing education and licensure, which most of our clients don't have. They outsource this stuff to the audit firm, which is allowed. And when you do that, all that's required is you're required to have this finding in here. It doesn't impact any support from the federal or state or local governments. So this, until they change the audit standards on that, this finding is going to live with us for a little while. Unless Michelle or John want to go out and get an accounting degree and get their continuing education up to snuff and do it that way.
So suppose we, quote unquote, contracted with an accountant to be our accountant representative, but they didn't work out of this building and technically didn't do anything for us.
If they are part of your internal control structure, then that would work. So we do have clients that have contract CPAs that come in and help. We can't do that from the audit perspective because we can't audit our own work. But we do have clients that do that, and they have their licensed CPAs that are doing some accounting work and preparing financial statements for them. You got to weigh the cost benefit approach for that. If they're going to charge you 10 grand and we put it as part of our audit, you know, that's up to you guys as to if you want to spend the money on doing that.
That would be more along the line of $1.
What's that?
So I was thinking more along the line of $1.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you're going to find
keep doing what we're doing. All right.
Yeah. All right. So that concludes my report. And I think, Melinda, you asked me a question on 2018. I'm looking at your financial statements for 18. And you also had no expenditures expenditures in excess of budgets in 18. So you got 2-year streak going.
Okay, so Michelle was out of the meeting room when that discussion was come to play. So I believe her comment would be pretty much as long as she's been clerk, that's never happened. We're reported where our budget's over. I did go collect my information so that you can know what I did do after year end, because you make your motion in November for her to be able to take from contingency as long as it's a general fund expense and department. So you did have 3 departments that were over budget at year end, which we used and took from contingency. The first one, actually this first one we didn't take from contingency. The Marine Department was over their budget for at year end, and they had a budgetary line item that's called donations. And the undersheriff had decided at the time, instead of using contingency money for that, that they were going to reduce their deduction or their donation line item, giving them less donation money for this year. So that rolls over into their fund. On top of that, we did have prior board approval to hire a new probate register, as well as keeping the current probate register at the time on staff, which was in December. So there was a salary increase, as well as the benefits that go with that to the probate court, which was over. The remonumentation, that was over 755, but that was revenue came in, which then did the expense. So I did change the revenue line item and the expense line item to show that. The largest expenses that you had at year end was the Schaumburg drain. And that was all part of those contracts that you went into in November and December. And so we were able to accommodate the drain commissioner for those special projects of $13,000. So that was a large item at the end of the year. The other thing I wanted to touch base on, if you're interested right now, is what you actually had budgeted for your fund balance forward to balance your budget. In 2019 was $1,223,897,000. $1,223,897. So with that being said, your net position, as Steve talked about, was a negative $774,791. 2 of those costs were your transfer out for your capital improvements, which was your roof as well as your HVAC. That was $641,000 that you took directly from your general fund. And you also had your expenses within the dam, which were not allocated through budget, and that was $75,000 that was transferred at the end of the year to fund the dam repairs there. So I just wanted to give you that proportion of, you had 1.2 that you were taking from fund balance. You actually, per your audited figures, took 774.
Commissioner Law.
Thank you. I was just going to ask for that, and I was going to bring us back to, we kind of skirted over it, but back on page 49, when it talks about that we have no expenditure or budgetary funds. That's because we do have an awesome accounting department. So thank you for that. I mean, it's phenomenal, the way you guys are on top of that, but I just want to recognize the amount of work I know that you guys put into that, and that's right after Christmas, for that last meeting of the year, so that we can get that gold star there. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
There's a lot of scrambling that goes on right around that last week of December in a lot of our governments.
Yeah.
Any questions on the financial statements, the footnotes, the pension disclosures, yellow book report that we've gone over? Any questions at all? I've got one more letter to go through that I'll just take a few minutes, but I want to make sure I answer any questions that you may have with respect to the financial statements and the related footnotes.
Everybody's shaking their head no, so.
Oh, I just.
Oh, go ahead.
Working remotely, how did that work? Did that work good just because we have a good working relationship, or is this something you're going to look at doing in the future, even if we're all, got a vaccine?
Great question. I don't. This is definitely going to change how public accounting does business going forward, for sure. How we were able to respond to it. the American Institute of CPA came out with a series of guidances in terms of, how to conduct a remote audit. And a lot of it was, when you go in and look at a transaction and it was recorded right and the dollars are right, that's one thing. But when you look your client in the eye and you're asking those hard questions about fraud, about material misstatements and the emotional questions that go along with an audit, those will never go away being done in person. So how we did it this year, we did it via Zoom. In some cases, they were recorded. If we felt that there was a risk, we would record the conversations, and those would be part of our audit files. But those kinds of conversations are not ever going to leave our profession, because you can tell a lot about somebody's facial expressions and body language when you start asking uncomfortable questions where problems may lie. Looking at the underlying documentation and the recording of the general ledger, that's easy stuff. You can do that remotely for sure. But the heart-to-heart conversations and control walkthroughs, those are never going to go away. Plus, nobody likes sitting in our offices 5 straight days. I don't know how our tax people do it now. They sit there for 5 straight days and 7 in the morning till 7 at night, and that would just drive our audit staff crazy. They like to be out in the field. All right, so hearing no more questions about the financial statements, the only other item I have here is the independent auditor's communication with those charged with governance. This is basically a summary memorandum of the audit. I'll go through this real quick. The first bold caption talks about our responsibility in relation to the financial statement audit. I issued an engagement letter March the 2nd that said we were going to do A, B, and C as part of our audit. I'm here to tell you we have concluded our audit procedures and have issued the financial statements. Under plan, scope, and timing of the audit at the bottom of the first page, we had internal planning meetings that concluded on March the 18th. We did not need to modify them or change them. The client was very cooperative and came forward with all of the documentation we requested, timely and accurate, which is great. Even in regards to all this COVID stuff, you guys were very responsive. Top of page 2, everybody in the firm complied with all of our ethical requirements. Under qualitative aspects, we talk a little bit there about the adoption of GASB 84. Under significant accounting estimates, you see the 3 bullet points there are your 3 main estimates embedded in your financial statements. And the last paragraph there says we evaluated the key factors and assumptions used to develop these estimates and determine that they are reasonable to the financial statements taken as a whole. So we are comfortable with those 3 bullet points above, which talk about estimated useful life of capital assets, accrued compensated absences, and then insurance claims for your third-party administrators. Bottom of page 2, no significant difficulties in dealing with management. There were no uncorrected or corrected misstatements at the top of page 3. No disagreements with management. Attachment C to this document was going to have a 6 or 7 page letter, which is the representation letter that we have signed by leadership at the county that tells us that what they've given us is accurate and honest to the best of their knowledge and belief. To our knowledge, there were no consultations with other accountants. If so, you should let us know so we can make sure that the fact pattern that's given to both accounting firms are the same. Conclusions may be different, but the fact pattern should be the same. We've got a couple, not findings, we got a couple of internal control recommendations. We already talked about the other information in the documents containing audited financial statements. Top of page 4, upcoming changes in accounting standards. Those are in an attachment here, but keep in mind all of those accounting standards have been moved out by 1 year. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board has pushed everything out by a year, so you're not going to have anything adopted in 2020. That's informational purposes only. So let's go to attachment A, which is A1, it's page A1. As we talked about in the Yellow Book report, you got material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, control deficiencies are your major defined levels of findings. Then we have these things called other matters. And these can be communicated written or they can be communicated orally. Our firm has a habit or has a requirement to have these all communicated in writing. So A1 has 2 other matter recommendations. I think the first one talks about the county credit card that was used by somebody other than who it was issued to. That situation has been rectified. That credit card has been destroyed. So if you look at the last sentence, we recommend that the county continue to carefully monitor credit card purchases, that card members do not share their authorized credit cards, and that the purchases only be made and approved for transactions that are consistent with the county's documented credit card policy. I understand there was a lot of heat around this throughout the year, and I think the way that you resolve that by getting rid of that credit card, that is a major step in the right direction to making this go away. I don't expect this coming back next year. I think there was enough time spent on that in 2019 that we don't want to see this one again. So I would not expect this to be present in next year's audit report. The next one, controls over petty cash. We recommend the county establish a procedure for periodically reconciling petty cash amounts to the amounts recorded in the general ledger. So if you've got petty cash funds out there, they should be reconciled at least quarterly, preferably monthly, just like any other bank reconciliation. Any questions on those 2 findings or matters? I'm not going to call them findings. I'm calling them matters.
Commissioner Rushton. You need to turn on, you have to unmute.
Thank you. My question is, how many petty cash accounts do we have out there? Do we know?
I'd have to double check with the treasurer, but it's either 1 or 2.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not talking a lot of money here.
No, and I didn't know how many accounts we had, if each department had a petty cash account. So that's what I was interested in finding out.
Yeah, we could double check with John on that, but I believe that the sheriff's office might possibly have one. The one that this is in regards to was senior services. And it's about less than $1,000.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now to round out this particular letter, section B, B1, and page B2, these are the upcoming changes in accounting standards. Really, I'm not going to comment on this because they've been pushed out by a year. And I just want you guys as a board to know that we will help with any accounting pronouncement as they come out and working with management to get them implemented. Some are way more complicated than others. And for example, at the very top of B1, GASB 87 for leases, there's going to be a little bit of meat on the bones for that one for Leelanau County, but some of these other ones are not going to affect you at all. So if you're really looking for a way to fall asleep, just start looking into that stuff. And then Appendix C is all the representation letter that has been signed by Chet, Michelle, and John, which is basically a letter telling us that what they gave us was accurate and honest to the best of their knowledge. I will take any questions, and with that, I would conclude my report to the Board of Commissioners. I'd like to thank Chet, and Michelle, and Jen, and John, and the whole crew over there for helping us, because there's a lot of work that goes into this document, and without their help, we can't get it there. So my hat's off to them. Everybody worked well throughout this new world order we're in, and I appreciate the time and the talent that they put into helping us get through the audit. And I appreciate you guys as board members, as I now live in Leelanau County, so you guys are my board commissioners now too. So,
Steve, a question from the teacher. The letter grade you get at this audit?
I give you an A- on this one. And boy, you are right on the verge of an A. You know, if we didn't have any of those 2 little matters, I guess we'll call them, throughout the year, we'd probably be at an A. but let's do an A-.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or statements? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
You too.
Yes, yeah.
All right, so then that would bring us to review of financials. Any questions, Commissioner Ansel?
I have one question that already got answered, but in the claims and accounts, on page 15, there's a IT charge from Amazon services. Do we have like cloud account there or something?
Yes.
Is that what that, you think that's?
Yes, that's what it does say on the invoice.
It just says IT Amazon services.
Yeah, on the description, it says so much for this and so much for this, and it is separated out.
Thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Walker.
Hi. I had one question on page 15. It was Summit Irrigation.
On claims?
Claims and accounts, page 15. It was Summit, I believe. A sprinkler system? Is that who we've used? Is that who does our sprinkler system?
It used to be Lautner, so I'd have to see what the difference with the different vendor, but.
Okay.
Was it for parts, maybe? Was it for parts?
Let me find it. Summit. No, it says annual sprinkler system inspection. Or is that this sprinkler system?
Oh, it could be this sprinkler.
Oh, there you go.
I'm guessing it's a fire.
Okay, that's why I didn't think we changed vendors. I
Yeah.
didn't remember doing
What
that.
did they put it under the description? Is it under
Um,
buildings and grounds, 631?
LAC Building and grounds.
Yep, so that's what that would be.
So, yeah, I saw building and grounds and I thought, oh.
No, not, right.
Grounds, okay. Not that it
Commissioner-
doesn't need.
Oh.
Are you, go ahead, were you through?
I had we had on page 10 and then the very last page, we had,
Post audit or claims?
claims still, so sorry. Whitmer Public Safety Group, and then the other one was on page, a different vendor, but it's for the jail and they have the non-contact forehead thermometers. Did we buy two?
Yes.
For over there, one
Yes.
for the jail, one for the.
Does it say, I'm sorry, because I don't have it.
One says jail, and the other.
One I know is for sure for the jail.
Okay, let me see what the other one was.
The issue they're having is if they wanted to purchase,
And then in McKesson, it also says jail, so they're both
Yep.
for the jail.
Yep, my guess is that with this, I didn't talk to Todd specifically, and I'm not sure if Johanna did, is it's hard to get these. So that maybe he had to use two vendors. So he could only get one from one vendor, one from another.
But
Yep.
he needed two, because they're contact skin.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, that was it for me, thank you.
Commissioner Rush. You have to unmute. You're muted.
Thank you for reminding me about that mute button. On page 8, claims and accounts, I noticed that there's a request for $4,553 for the bluegill. And I'm just wondering why we have ordered fish when Kids Fish Day was canceled.
On the report, does it state the invoice date? Is it prior to COVID?
No, it would not be, it's May 19th, and I can perhaps speak to that, Ty probably can also. Parks and Rec discussed that at great length because we had to unfortunately cancel the fish day. So the question was, do we still put the fish in there, et cetera? And it kind of boiled down to the continuation of getting the fish or not getting the fish. So if we don't get them 1 year, what will that do to the next year as far as there's some holdover all the time. But I think the main driving factor was that a lot of people are not going to be able to travel outside the county this year for vacation, for recreation, et cetera. So we thought that this was a good way to at least offer that recreation opportunity within the county. So parents, but they can't take a trip, but maybe they can go down to Veronica Valley and fish all summer long with their kids. Hopefully continue that kids experience. And then there are people too who fish out of the pond for, you know, they kind of plan on, kind of depend on those fish too, to actually eat on the dinner table. So I guess that's it, unless Ty has anything. Okay. It was a tough decision to make this year. It was tough to cancel Kids Fish Day. It was a tough decision to go ahead and purchase the fish without Kids Fish Day.
Go ahead, Commissioner Rushton.
So as I understand it, that being a semi-shallow pond, there's not much holdover of those fish. So what you're saying is the community needs to be made aware that the county has provided an opportunity for them to fish, one, for food, and two, to entertain our small citizens in the community.
Yeah, so we did talk about making sure that, I think through the website, that there will be fish in there, that will be an opportunity. Maybe even a press release. We talked about getting that word out.
Commissioner Ansel.
I find it interesting that, you know, we had this discussion during budget season about, you know, whether we should stock fish, and the you know, I was against it, but the consensus was, we're gonna stock it so we can do it for Kids Day. And yet, they canceled Kids Day and never came back to the board to say, oh, we're gonna put the fish in anyway, even though when we were talking budget, that's what the reason was, it was for Kids Day. And yet, they took it on them, the Parks and Recs took it on themselves to change the purpose of why we stock those fish. That should have come back to the board, in my opinion. Because that's not what was discussed during budget.
Understood. Purpose wasn't, but it was budgeted.
The money was budgeted for a specific purpose. And the purpose changed, and you didn't come back to the board to say, hey, you know, is this a good use?
You're absolutely correct.
I guess I would be concerned about the survival of them, because I know on Kids Day, there's 700 people there and they all catch 10 fish or whatever, and so a significant amount are taken out. But to put the same amount in, you know, I wonder how the survival rate's gonna be. Or did they spread them out to the 3 ponds then?
There was talk of 2 different drops.
Right. And was it the same amount? Because I think there was a reduced number purchased.
I think so too.
I think it was.
Yeah.
Because I do know part of the reasoning that at least from what I read, was to help the vendor out, because he had already raised all the fish, because the order was sort of planned, and if he didn't buy them, then he was gonna have to kill them or do something. He couldn't support them through the summer or for next year.
Well,
so, not that should be our problem, but it, you know.
It affects us being able to get fish in the future.
Right. Bingo. We want him to have fish for us next year.
Right.
But they don't survive over the winter. The pond is too small, they winter kill.
Some fish survive.
There's a few, but
Yeah.
the majority of them, they have a winter kill situation there.
Yeah, they've done an inventory and some survive. There's actually some really big fish in there.
Yeah, it feeds the turtles.
You're right.
Save the turtles.
That's what it does. Okay. All right, so any other questions about the claims and account or financials? Seeing none, then we move on into the special reports by staff, commissioners, or agencies. Seeing none, we'll go to public comment. So at this time, we'd have public comment. If you want to, you can call in. The phone number is 231-256-8109. It's 231-256-8109. Please call in. It's a limited supply. Oh, yes, that's right. We do have a letter. I don't know where I put it, but from people concerned about the sheriff and the funding for the sheriff. And that would be made available at the, on our website with the minutes. And it's from Jennifer and Claire Murray. And if you'd like to read that letter concerning the sheriff and the new policies they'd like enacted, that should be available. Any questions about any other public comment at this time? Okay, seeing none, then we would move over to commissioner's comment. Commissioner Wesson.
I had two items I wanted to bring up. One was after what happened in Midland, I saw the maps on the dams, and I wondered if we are working with the dam authority to do any sort of evaluation, or is that already in process with what we approved in the spring? But it was the Leelanau Dam was one they highlighted as a potential problem area.
No, I'd be surprised.
No, there was I'll defer to Tony.
Okay, Commissioner answer.
The Leelanau Dam is evaluated by the state and has a low risk. And the reason why is the dam is almost at the mouth there. So if the dam were to fail, the flooding would be what's in the marina. And that's the only, there's no risk of, very little risk of people dying or, things like that. So the Leelanau Dam risk is actually very low just because it's located right at the mouth.
But it was highlighted in the map of Michigan dams as one of the dams that had a potential issue. I will check on that.
Okay, but yeah, it was categorized as a low risk. Every dam has is required to have an engineering study to show the impact of a catastrophic failure. And, they showed that on, for the Midland situation, they showed the various impacts. And, you can go online and see that for any dam. You can actually see the engineer, and they do it by, topographical, this is your elevation. If this water were to be released, it would come down and would flood this area, and they actually show the areas that would be flooded.
Well, and I may be mistaken, but I would like to check on that. That was it. The other comment I wanted to make, and I appreciate, Chet, you following up with the MMRMA inquiry, but I wasn't real satisfied with his response back to you, because I think the real issue was the chain of command. The issue for me wasn't that he copied commissioners on the letter. The issue was that an employee could contact our risk management people and get a ruling that was then sent to us, and it made me uncomfortable. In fact, so uncomfortable that and the chair has told me that I messed up on my communications process doing it. But I was concerned about the staffing, so I did ask for if it's really an issue of supervisory people needed, I think the staff is here to do it. It just means that some of the officers would have to change their work schedule. But if we really do need a supervisor on duty, I think there's staff on there to do it. But that means that on a rotating basis, the lieutenant and the sergeants and the undersheriff and the sheriff might have to work a different schedule. But I was uncomfortable with the fact that one of the county staff people was able to get a letter saying, yes, commissioners, there's a liability issue.
Well, that will not happen again. Also, there was no formal study done. It was a phone call based, it was a phone call from one of our employees to one of their employees. He issued a letter without asking for any information. There was no documentation. There was no flow chart provided. The letter was generic in nature, he said. But however, it was sent to the board as a recommendation. So yes, we've had issues with it. The discussion that the clerk and I had with our MMRA rep yesterday, he was fully in agreement. He was careful with his words in his email, but he was very apologetic and assured it would not happen. We have policies in place with our auditing firm, we have procedures in place for our legal counsel to prevent employees from just contacting them. And this will not happen again with MMRA. But the key is, this letter was generic, and even if it was proper, there was no formal investigation done. It was simply based on a phone call discussion, which is not the way you want to make recommendations. So I think MMRA internal, well, I know they had discussions on this process yesterday.
Thank you for following up on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good information to get, so thank you for that. It was
Exactly.
good to have.
Any other questions or, we're at the commissioner, commissioner comments. Any other commissioner comments? Commissioner Sotomayor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment that I think it's going to be helpful, and I'm glad that people want to have the internet service providers back to participate in our special workshop. All of those providers, with one exception, have been working with the lift all along, and the information they provide is very, very useful on their service capabilities and just issues in general. For the workshop, in order to make maximum, because these guys are taking time out of work, so to make maximum use of their time, I just want to remind my fellow commissioners that the county website for our May 29th special meeting on internet contains a great many handouts on broadband and internet service that would be helpful for you to review before the meeting if you haven't already. The handouts, a lot of them were, well, the majority were provided by the different members from LIFT, including Ron and Matt. The handouts include a glossary of internet terminology, videos on different types of internet service, how signals are transmitted, also a history of the status of internet service in Leelanau County via the LIFT updated report, maps showing that we create, that came out of our survey that show internet service countywide and who are the service providers at that time, LIFT accomplishments and activities. It has the results from the countywide LIFT survey, which form the backbone of the community technology plan. So I just wanted to encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to review those materials, to take a little peek, because I think it'll help you in preparation for the workshop itself.
Any other commissioner comments? Thank you, Commissioner Citizen. Seeing none, then we'd move to approval of financials. Commissioner Walker.
I would recommend approval of claims and accounts for $130,066.93.
Supported by Commissioner Ansel. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7-0. Commissioner Lawler.
I would recommend approval of post audit $1,155,132.64.
Supported by Commissioner Ansel. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, give the same sign. Motion passes 7-0. We are adjourned.